Almost a year ago, I, 24 male, was fresh out of college and had just moved into an apartment with my middle school bestie, 23 female, and her fiance, 25 male. This was after a long period of not seeing her in person. My best friend and I had a long and great relationship with a few rocky periods. I didn't know the fiance well, but had met him a couple of times. He came off as kind of rude and loud, but mostly nice enough. I let a lot of little annoying behavior slide because she was so in love with him. I really just wanted to spend time with my best friend. Over the course of a few months, I slowly discovered that she was trapped in an abusive relationship with the most classic example of a malignant narcissist imaginable. Their fights, really him just raging at her while she cried, escalated to the point where he was completely trashing the apartment, breaking her phone and laptop, hiding her car keys and blocking the door, and even grabbing her arm so hard she had bruises, all while hurling out the worst insults he could fathom at the top of his lungs for hours. This man is about a foot taller and 100 pounds heavier than me, so there was nothing I could do, other than give her a ride somewhere else, away from him until the next day. He obviously didn't like it when I did that. Once it reached the point of physical harm against her, I put my foot down and demanded that he move out or I would call the cops. He wasn't technically signed on to the lease, so I could have him kicked out. He begged for time to find a new place. He was extremely drunk and high the night he hurt her, and he promised to stay sober until he moved. Not wanting to escalate things, I agreed on the condition that nothing like that ever happened again. My friend and her fiance broke up soon after that. 3 weeks passed and everything is going great. Ex-fiance has found a new place and is in training for a new job, and while still loud and inconsiderate, he hasn't caused any problems so far. I get ready for bed early. I have an important meeting the next morning. I put on some comfy pajamas, locking my door before I change out of habit. My best friend is out working and it's just me upstairs in bed and the ex-fiance downstairs yelling on the phone about something. I tune him out and try to sleep. He's moving out next week after all. My chest rattles from the booming footfalls up the stairs to my room, waking me from my sleep. My eyes snap open to see my bedroom doorknob rattling back and forth. Locked. He lets out a yell of pure malice and bangs on the door. Screams my name. And it's so slurred he sounds like he's trying to impersonate a lizard man. The hinges aren't looking so good. We lived in a crappy cheap apartment with thin doors. I have to do something before he breaks open the door, right? I say the only thing I can think of. What the heck? Suddenly the banging and screaming stopped. My doorknob falls still. After a terrifying moment of silence, he says flatly, "Open the door, bud. Just come and open it." I still laugh about that one. Like after all that, I just walk over and open up. Instead, I grabbed my essentials and jumped out the window. I was on the second floor, but we lived on a hill, so the fall wasn't quite that high. Still managed to fall wrong. I hobbled as quickly as I could to my car and peeled away. I called my best friend and warned her not to go home. We made plans for her to stay with a friend after she got off work. I made it to the friend's house and passed out for a few hours. I woke up from a call from my bestie. He traveled all the way to her workplace with a knife and broke in. He assaulted her and held the knife up to her special needs client's throat and said he'd kill him in front of her. Thankfully, a coworker overheard everything in another room and was able to call the police in time for everybody to come out alive. My best friend also said he was on the phone with her while he was banging on my door, and he said he was going to kill me and make her listen. I was totally alone in the apartment with him, sleeping upstairs in my bed. If I hadn't locked my door that night, would I even still be alive? If I had left my car keys downstairs, would I have been able to get away? When I returned to my apartment the next morning, my bedroom door was completely kicked in. My belongings were scattered everywhere, and the large butcher knives were missing from the kitchen, instead sitting in the corner of the hallway to my room. I have gotten this story off my chest as it has messed me up and still creeps me out to this day. And it all came back to me tonight like it was yesterday. My wife at the time and I used to visit her parents in a state up north, about a 4-hour drive. It was an old nice big house with rolling green hills in the backyard and big oak trees. We always stayed in the apartment above the garage, but this trip they told us they were renovating the apartment and had us stay in one of the bedrooms. We usually stayed there for a few days, so we had luggage. I was putting away our clothes in the dresser and I came across some pictures in the bottom drawer. My wife was downstairs with her parents. Anyways, these pictures quite shocked me and I'm pretty sure they were not meant to be found. They were pictures of my father-in-law inserting objects into my mother-in-law. Now 3 things were messed up about these pictures. 1. These objects weren't your standard play toys that most of us are used to. He was inserting a tennis racket, the round end in one pick, a wine bottle in another. You can guess what end. I think a stuffed animal and some other screwed up stuff. I freaked out and I didn't look at any more. Just quickly put them back into the drawer. Second creepy thing about the pics was the smiles they had on their faces. Both of them. It was almost like they were, I don't know, like they had extended smiles. Like in the horror movies with like the girl's lips being cut on each side to make the smile seem wider, or that clown on American Horror Story. Just nutty smiles, like they were almost painted on their faces. What the heck did I just see? I'm thinking to myself. Now, I know like no one was around when I was looking at them or standing in the doorway watching me. That adds relevance to what I'm about to tell you in a bit. Okay, the weird thing about the pics is that her dad was retired from a very high profile job and very conservative, and I could never ever see him doing something like that, let alone her mom participating. I walked downstairs freaking a bit, but managed with some alcohol to have dinner with everybody and saved face. I remember everything was normal, like every other time we visited, and we went to bed later. During the night, I was woken up by something that freaked me out even more. My mother-in-law was standing at our doorway just staring at me with that same messed up smile, holding a wine bottle and a tennis racket. I just flipped right there and couldn't move. I was paralyzed. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, she was gone, like in 2 seconds. The wife is sleeping and snoring. Now it seems so real, but I'm pretty sure I was not dreaming. I wasn't drunk, but it's up for debate still in my head. But if I had to stake my life on it, she was there at the doorway. At the time, I had all those questions in my head. Like, did she see me looking at the pics? But that's too crazy coincidental, and I know all of them were downstairs at the time. Anyways, the next day, I'm the last one up and walking downstairs, and my wife is really mad at me at breakfast. It was like she picked a fight with me for no reason. I think it was about the supposed crappy job I did building a wall at their house the previous summer. That was bullcrap and she knew it, they knew it, and I knew it. I do very good work, but she kept on about it, and her parents just sat there and kind of smiled while we were arguing like it was nothing. I remember looking at all of them like, what the heck is going on? It was like a big conspiracy. We never argued like that before, and even if I built that wall with cardboard, something like that would have never turned into the argument it did. We were all laid back people, and that would have been a joking kind of thing. But my wife was on a different level that morning, and her parents were like twice as weird just sitting there like they were. That freaked me out even more than the yelling act my wife was putting on. I was just so traumatized by them, the whole situation, that I went upstairs and packed and left the house. With no objection from the wife or the in-laws, not a word then. That was super weird too. I got into the car and ended up driving back home for 4 hours by myself, getting more and more creeped out with each mile, my anxiety building. Was it the pictures? Did Mom manipulate the whole thing because of her weird American Horror Story ass the night before? No phone call from the wife the whole way home. No nothing. I did leave a WTF is wrong with you people today message on her parents' landline. It was 100% weird in that kitchen that morning. By the time I got home, I remember I was ready to leave my wife for sure and never ever wanted to see my in-laws' faces again, even though I liked them both a lot before and we got along really well. My wife came home a couple or a few days later, I think. We made up on the phone and she apologized, I think, but I wasn't there by the time she got home. Long story short, we got divorced not long after. She never did really explain why she jumped on me like that morning. By then I didn't care much how we invested in that marriage or how beautiful she was or how much I still loved her. I was just too creeped out and I knew things probably would never be the same again, at least in my head. I never did see my in-laws again or my ex-wife again, or ever tell her what I saw in the drawer that day or what I saw that night. It's been almost 20 years and too late now for answers. This is my first post in the sub, so forgive me if this isn't the right place, but this summer had a series of unfortunate and creepy events. This is a long one. In May, I moved into a new apartment on the 2nd floor of a 4-story building. I'm a single mom of 2 younger kids. The pandemic was raging and I was in the middle of not only a move, but also a divorce and a career change. My industry was off limits during the lockdown and the state had yet to set up the unemployment system for independent contractors. Needless to say, I was stressed. All of the changes were stressful for my kids as well, and there was a fair amount of yelling and arguing from all of us for a few months. Being in an apartment building, the sound carries, and I was sure the new neighbors thought I was a terrible mom. I had very briefly met our downstairs neighbor in passing a few times and was relieved to find out that she had a young child as well. Maybe she would be more understanding of the unavoidable kid noise than a single person. It soothed my anxiety a bit about being a bad neighbor. Being in a pandemic, though, we didn't interact much except for a brief hello in the hallway. Fast forward to September, things had calmed down quite a bit for us. We were settled in. My finances were stable, and the kids were more used to being stuck with each other all the time. There were still occasional spats, but nothing out of the ordinary for a normal family. So you can imagine my surprise when one day I came home from work to find a card and a gift bag in my front door. It would have to be from somebody who had a key to the building, but I still didn't really know any of my neighbors, so what the heck was it? I was immediately wary and had a sinking feeling in my chest. As soon as I picked up the bag, I could tell it was a bottle of wine and the card was thick and heavy. Normally, I would be excited about such a gift, but my spidey sense was through the roof that something was off and I was getting nauseous. As soon as I got inside, I opened the card. It was from the downstairs neighbor. She told me that she was my children's guardian angel and that this was a warning to me, that I had no right to harm them and I needed to relax. Now, seeing as how I never laid a hand on my children, I was confused, angry, and offended even. Had she mistaken the kids' roughhousing for me beating my children? And I'm a pretty chill person. Helping other people to relax is literally my full-time job, so her telling me I needed to relax nearly made me laugh from incredulity. I was floored, creeped out, and still had some major bad vibes. I think I would have probably just completely ignored it, but seeing as how I'm going through a divorce with a bit of a custody disagreement, I couldn't really afford to have some weirdo call the cops on me for no reason. I had no idea what to do, but I was almost panicked at that point, so I went to my room and pulled my tarot cards. I took a few deep breaths to calm my mind, shuffled, concentrated on the situation, and drew one card. It was the Nine of Swords. Now, if you're not familiar with tarot, here's what it looks like. Smith-Waite deck for those in the know. A woman sitting up in her bed, head in her hands weeping. There are 9 swords hung horizontally on the wall behind her. It's one of the ugliest and most ominous cards in the whole system and represents despair, depression, anxiety, and intense emotional struggle. I took it as a sign to keep my distance, but I couldn't just ignore it. She lives right downstairs and thinks I'm abusing my children. I couldn't just let it slide. So I wrote her a note back saying that I appreciate her concern for them, assuring her that they are safe, and explaining that not only do they roughhouse quite a bit, but also my oldest has several disabilities that affect his speech and balance, so she may hear him shouting and falling quite a bit. I gave her my number and told her to text me if we were ever being too loud. Slipped a note under her door and hoped for the best. Still feeling majorly freaked out about the whole situation, I burned the cards she gave me and threw the bottle of wine in the dumpster. Couldn't even have them in the house. A few days later, I get a text from her. She said that she was sorry to have misunderstood the situation, and it seems we have so much more in common than she thought. She believed we were destined to become great friends, and invited my kids and me to join her and her son, 5 at the zoo. Intuition still on high alert, I wanted so badly to say no, but was unsure how I could do that without just making things really awkward, and I didn't want to do that since I would still have to see her all the time. So I told her truthfully that between me being back to work and my kids doing virtual school, there was no time for at least the next few weeks. We never settled on a date, but I left it open. The next night, around 9:30 p.m., I got another text from her. I opened it up, and it was literally the longest text message I had ever received. So long that Apple had somehow sent it via iMessage as its own document. Even having worked in tech support for Apple, I had never seen this happen. It was a novel and it was bad. She essentially poured her heart out, telling me her husband, a beautiful black man who was built like a brick house, had been cheating on her for years, that she had recently quit her job and stopped taking her meds, and that soon she was going to leave him and go on a long vacation and learn how to swim. She told me that her son was perfect and a genius, and that it was his destiny to tutor my son, who again is disabled, not behind on his schoolwork. She told me her mother and husband had tried to work together to have her committed, just because she didn't believe in God anymore, and started buying crystals. That her husband would rather she, a white woman, call the cops and he, a black man, die by their hand and go to therapy with her. That all her son wanted in the whole world was to go outside and blow bubbles with my kids. That she would be willing to babysit them to give me a break. I did not respond. I decided it was just best to keep my boundaries and steer clear of her, and surprisingly I was successful. I never got another message from her after that and never saw her in the hallway. But I was living on edge, wondering when I would see her, what she would say or do. It went on like that for about 6 weeks. Early October, I'm falling asleep reading in my bed at about 10:30 p.m. I hear sirens. Living in a big city, this is normal, and it didn't even register to me that they had stopped in front of my building until I heard yelling outside. Still, whatever's happening is none of my business. I ignore it, then I hear yelling downstairs through the floor. I've never heard a single sound through the floor. It had been 6 weeks since her last message, but immediately I thought, wow, this is it. It's happening. She called the cops on her husband. In quick succession, I thought of him being a black man at odds with the police. I thought of Breonna Taylor's murder and how their bullets went into neighboring apartments. I thought of my kid sleeping in the next room. I jumped and looked out the window, trying to get a sense of what was happening. Police had the street blocked off, and there was at least 4 squad cars and an ambulance. More cops were coming, running full speed into the building. I could still hear yelling downstairs. I'm freaking out. Do I wake my kids and run them out the back door? Take them up to the top floor and the other side of the building? After pacing for a second, I run back to the window just in time to see a flood of cops booking it out of the building, holding something. The ambulance then tears away full speed, and then 2 cops run out with her in cuffs, throw her into a second waiting ambulance and pull away. Another cop runs up and starts wrapping the whole place in crime scene tape immediately. My windows begin to open, and only being on the second floor, I can hear a group of cops consoling each other, saying things like, "You did what you could," and "preservation of life." Within 10 minutes, the street is flooded with onlookers, news crews, and higher-up police. Between hearing what they were saying and alerts from the Citizen app, I piece it together. She had taken her child's life. They found her sitting in the bed, crying. Nobody on the block got much sleep that night. The next day was all helicopters and news crews and a slowly growing memorial of candles and signs and balloons and toy dinosaurs. I was devastated, trying to keep my kids from seeing the circus. I still haven't told them what happened, by the way, and unsure how to handle it all. I reached for my tarot cards again, this time with a different deck. I had a very strong feeling that there was one card that wanted to be seen and it would be easy to find, so I pulled the deck out of the box, shuffled, and picked a card. It didn't resonate at all. I picked another. Same thing. Wasn't it? I'm just tired, I thought. I go to put them back, and I realized there was one card that's still hanging out in the box. They hadn't all come out when I dumped it into my hand. I stared at it for a second and then reached in. 9 of Swords. The woman is in her bed surrounded by sharp objects. I threw it down on my bed and walked away. Maybe unrelated, maybe not. A week later, after things had died down, I took my kids outside. We had finished virtual school for the day and had some crackers for a snack and went outside to wait for AAA to come plug a flat tire that developed the day prior. We were outside for maybe 45 minutes total, never staying more than 100 feet from the front door of the building since I had gotten a good parking spot the day before. Witnessed nothing out of the ordinary. Tiredness was fixed, fresh air was had, and we went back inside. On the way in, I picked up a piece of trash in the stairwell, unlocked my apartment door, and went straight to the kitchen to throw it away. I stepped on the lever to open the lid and stopped short, sitting right in front of the top of the trash can. On top of the cracker box I had thrown out right before we went outside was a Dunkin' Donuts coffee cup. My mind immediately started racing. What? Had I somehow gone to Dunkin' Donuts that day and completely blocked it from memory? Wait, no, we hadn't even left the house all day except for just to wait for AAA. Had I put a maintenance request and just forgotten about it? I racked my brain for anything that needed fixing and drew a blank. Somebody had been in my house, but my door was locked. I had locked it on the way out like I always do. Just the handle, not the deadbolt. It was still locked when I came back inside. Could somebody have picked it? How did they even get into the building? I called the management office immediately and explained the situation, feeling like I was going crazy. This didn't make any sense. It had to be maintenance. The manager informed me that no, I hadn't filed any repair requests, and no, nobody had pulled the keys from my apartment that day. They have no idea who it was. Between the cops, the news, and the husband's family who had been understandably helping him move out, there had been a lot of strangers in and out of the building that week. My mind ran through all the possibilities, from someone finding her phone and reading the messages she had sent to me and deciding to have a little look-see while I was out, to 1 million other crazy scenarios I made up trying to rationalize it. I couldn't figure anything out. Nothing was missing, nothing was amiss. There was just a coffee cup in my trash can that didn't belong there. They changed my locks the next day. 1 week after that, my 4-year-old was playing alone in his room when I heard him say, "Haha, okay," and closed the closet door. Intrigued as to what he was up to, I peeked in. Didn't see him. I opened his closet door to find him crouched on the floor, grinning. When I asked what he was doing in there, he told me the little gray boy told him to hide. I start therapy next week, and I lock the deadbolt now. This happened when I was 19. I'm a hairdresser at Great Clips, and I see a lot of people every day. I was also 7 months pregnant at that point. I looked like I had a basketball in my belly. I'm 5'2" and thin. This particular day was a Saturday, very busy. It was right before picture day, so it was back-to-back children's haircuts. There were a lot of families in the lobby waiting for haircuts. I called the next name, and it was the dad of the kid getting their haircut next to me. He had 2 older children, a boy and a girl. They looked about 7 and 9. I escorted him to my chair, introduced myself, and started to ask the normal questions we ask to find out what kind of haircut they want. He asked for a 2 on the sides and back, 1/4 inch, and finger length on top. His hair was kind of shaggy looking, so it was a lot of length taken off. I start cutting his hair and making small talk. He immediately started asking about my pregnancy, and as a naive young woman and a first-time mom, I excitedly started to answer his questions. His kid that was getting his haircut next to me was asking for approval from dad, then waited in the lobby. The dude's demeanor changed 100% from great dad to Russell Williams, and if you don't know who Russell Williams is, look him up. Anyways, he starts talking about how pregnant women turn him on and how the run on my belly arouses him. By this time, I had only cut the sides and back with the clippers. There was like 4 inches on top, real long. I didn't say anything. I just blushed extremely hard because it was weird and I was creeped out. I'm in shock standing there looking down at my shears turned away from him, but I could see him in the mirror vice versa. I turned around to face him and he said, "Please let me buy your breast milk." I took the cape off him and kicked him and his kids out. They got their cuts for free that day. My manager was cutting hair next to me and she heard everything for herself. He tried to come into the shop again about a month later while I was still pregnant. The best part is, the mother of the kids and wife to the weird man thought she was going to come over to my salon and cuss me out. I pulled her in the back office and told her about the experience. He left with half a haircut, confused kids, and an even angrier, hopefully ex-wife. I have tons more weird stuff from when I was pregnant working at Great Clips. I was just reminded of this really scary incident involving a manager at one of the old jobs I had. This happened about 5 years ago when I was 20. I believe he was around 42 or so, give or take a few years plus or minus. To paint you a picture here, the manager in question, who we'll call Tim, was a short Viking-esque guy. Red beard, red hair, bright blue eyes, and a stocky build. Not muscular though. Tim was also a heavy smoker and known as a racist. He dropped the N-word at least 4 times a week for shock factor during conversations. He also used to refer to indigenous people as Indians. He stopped once he found out I was Métis and confronted him about it. He was mostly bark with a little bite, but was still somebody I was cautious around nonetheless. He also had a girlfriend who was 20 at the time. She was like an alternate reality version of me. Like me, she was a bigger girl. Size 24 to 26-ish. Piercings, tattoos, the works. I looked like the replicant, tall version of her. It was surreal. Never outright told me he had feelings for me, but on several occasions he'd comment on how much I reminded him of his girlfriend and would ask if I was into women in 3 ways. I was bisexual. He didn't know that though. I gave vague answers every time he asked something of the sort, but one day he made an offhand comment about bisexual women being greedy, to which I reacted negatively. He put the pieces together from there. A couple of weeks went by of him asking me questions about my interests and hobbies, what I do in my off time, my favorite music. Normally I chalk this up to office banter, but with the creepy undertones I had a hard time engaging with him about my personal life. At this time I'd also started seeing my partner of now 5 years. When my boss asked what I was doing after work, I informed him I was going to see my boyfriend. This sent him into a question tailspin. He asked me how we met, how long we'd been dating, and where he lived even. It's really weird. Once again, I kept the answers vague, but this time I went on and on about how much I loved my partner and how excited I was to have such an amazing partner in my life. I wanted to be crystal clear that I was not interested in my boss. That same evening as we were closing, he told me about his favorite music. He specifically mentioned a band called Immortal Technique and a song of theirs called Dance with the Devil. I shrugged as I wasn't familiar with the song, so he put it on the store speakers while he swept and I closed cash. For For those of you who aren't familiar with that song, it's a very graphic and disturbing song that has a rather intense twist at the end. If you like the song, that's your taste, whatever, but personally as a woman, I find it difficult listening to graphic depictions of extreme violence against women, period. Before continuing, I suggest you read through some of the lyrics of the song, specifically the last half as it pertains to this story. Tim turns up the music to an almost deafening level while I count out the cash and get our computers closed up. As he's sweeping, he's actively and loudly rapping along word for word, dropping N-bombs of course all the way through. He hadn't been looking at me until later half of the song, where the lyrics begin to depict a woman being you-know-whatted and killed by a group of men. It's visceral, violent, and terrifying. Tim turns to me at this point of the song and stares into my eyes while pointing and dancing to the lyrics, while still rapping along. He was making violent gestures while doing so, motioning a head-stomping gesture with his hands, thrusting during the you-know-what scene. I quickly closed cast faster than I ever had in my life. I felt like I was in danger at this point. Grabbed my bag and jacket as the song finished, and he turned it off and went, "Isn't that something? It's poetry. The storytelling is just amazing, isn't it?" I remember my whole body was tense. I muttered, "Not my cup of tea," and left. I should have given him notice right then and there, but I was in a rough employment situation and couldn't just get up and leave. After that, though, he actually stopped scheduling him and me together very often, and about a month later I gave my notice after finding a better job full-time. He was furious when I left, of course. The company actually ended up closing that location a few months later because Tim lost it, according to our common connection. A friend of mine, a worker of his. This friend of mine also told me he upped and moved to the other side of the country to be with his ex-wife. What made me remember this story was that a few months ago I was running errands in the outskirts of my city. I happened to stop by a random Taco Bell, and guess who walks in with a very young-looking woman on his arm? Tim. I was with my partner, who also recognized him when they made eye contact. My partner and I were already seated and eating by this point. Tim looked at us like a deer in the headlights and booked it out of there faster than a kite on the wind. Before he left, though, I noticed he had shaved his head and got some suspicious-looking tattoos on his arms. When he turned around, there was a distinct white power symbol patched on his jacket and his girlfriend's jacket, too. So not only was this guy a creep, but also a predator and now a white supremacist. I don't go to that area anymore unless I'm accompanied by my partner at all times. Tim is very much a part of my past, and I have no desire to run into him ever again. Thanks for listening. It feels good getting that off my mind and onto paper, so to speak. "22 female. My mom, 47, has been divorced from my father for about 6 years. They have a fairly good relationship still, or I guess the best that can be expected from the circumstances. My mom has gone through several men in the past few years, all of whom had their quirks, but this one is just rubbing me the wrong way. For the sake of the story and not giving out any actual names, I'll call him John. John is only 33, or 34, I forget which. He's a good bit younger than she is. I don't know much about him. I'd only seen him in pictures until last weekend. He looks nothing above average. Nobody that would throw up red flags. Average height, average build, average face. I live in the same state as my mom, but I live a few hours away, so like I said, I hadn't gotten a good chance to meet him before. The only reason I had gone home was to see my little brother that just got home on leave from the army. John kinda gave me weird vibes from the get-go. He didn't talk much, just kinda sat there and nodded his head a lot. I took this as nerves at first. He also open carries a pistol, but that isn't really uncommon where we are from. He began making me feel a bit uncomfortable when he started just putting his hands on my mom in less than an appropriate way. Like he would just grab her butt while talking to us and stuff. I know this isn't like the worst thing in the world, but have a level of respect, you know? Also, while my mom would talk to my brother, he would either barge into the conversation or pull her away entirely. Like he didn't like her not giving him attention. It got worse when I was trying to sleep and I could hear them through the walls. It seemed to me like he was trying to make me hear them having sex. That just isn't cool. I, my brother, and his friend had gone out for lunch the next day. When I came back, I found that my bras and underwear had been tampered with. Like they were all messed up instead of neatly arranged. And when I was showering, I could swear that he was standing on the other side of the door. At dinner, he kept insulting my mom when she would talk to me or my brother, to the point where my brother had grabbed him by the collar and threatened him to stop. He stopped. The last thing that happened was my brother's friend's girlfriend said that he had tried listening to her while she was in the bathroom. My brother's friend got mad and hit him, So he left and we didn't see him again. I don't know if he is abusive, a creep, or all of the above. He just gave me bad vibes, and I get chills thinking about him. I didn't feel safe with him around, and I don't feel safe with my mom around him. I live in a city located in a valley with a lot of smaller towns up the hills and mountains around. So it's part of the local culture for teenagers and young adults to visit these smaller areas during the winter to drink, smoke weed, and hang out with their friends. My uncle bought a house in one of these areas, so eventually I decided to get the keys and spend a weekend there with 5 of my friends. The house has 2 big bedrooms with 3 beds and a lot of extra mattresses. At night, we decided at some point to go back inside and just chill watching TV. But since the living room had no sofas yet, we brought some mattresses from the bedrooms and just used them. One of my friends, Victor, decided to go out to smoke, and after some minutes, we heard someone knocking at the window just behind us. Everybody got scared for a second, but just looked at the window and said something like, "Oh, it's just Victor." But since we were sitting on the mattresses closest to the ground, it wasn't easy to see clearly who was at the window, and since the person just stood there looking straight at one of the girls, I got up to check. I saw a man who somehow looked a lot like my friend but was a bit fatter and older than him. As I came to the conclusion that it was a stranger, I froze while looking at him and looking back at me when I said, "It's not Victor." Everybody also froze and looked at me, waiting for a reaction, but all I could think was to ask what he wanted. He just stood there for a second and asked, "There's a bar nearby and we need a drummer to play with our band. Is any of your friends a drummer by any chance?" Which weirdly enough I am, but I just told him no. And after some extra long seconds looking at us, he left. My friend came back and we made fun of the situation, making jokes on how it was him messing with us. Later, most of the group decided to sleep in one bedroom and leave the second one for me and one of the girls since they saw us kissing earlier. We all go to bed, but some hours later, I wake up to the girl shaking me in horror and whispering that she heard something coming from the kitchen. So I get up, tell her to lock the bedroom when I leave and go check the sound like the moron who always dies first in films. As I pass by the second bedroom, I think about calling someone else to join me. But as soon as I see them all sleeping, I hear something at the kitchen window. I quickly move there in silence, check around, and as soon as I find and grab a knife, the door opens right in front of me. It was the same guy. I knew it was no joke since I just saw my friend sleeping. It probably took like 5 to 10 seconds of us staring at each other, but it felt like forever. While still holding the door handle, he made a slow movement with the other hand towards something under his shirt, which was probably a gun or knife, but I also lifted my hand, showing him the knife, so he stopped. The kitchen was quite small, so we were standing pretty close to each other, and at this point we both knew it would end badly for both if he tried something, so I just shook my head and said as calmly as I could, "Don't." He just kept staring at me a bit more, and then finally closed the door and went away. I went back and told the girl it was nothing and that we should go back to bed. I didn't sleep that night. We left early in the morning, and I made sure to ask my uncle and cousins if they ever received weird visits there. They said that the only person who ever goes out there at night is the old neighbor when his wife doesn't let him arrive drunk at home, so he grabs my uncle's rocking chair to sleep until he gets sober. After reading through some of the human trafficking stories on here, I can't help but feel incredibly uneasy. My heart is racing at the thought of what we may have avoided. Long post, but worth it. So stay vigilant, women and men. For reference, my boyfriend is about 6'3" and 275 to maybe 300 pounds. He's very stocky, has a military style haircut, prior military, usually always wear a shirt with guns on it in some way, and has a fierce beard. This is important for the story. About 3 years ago, my boyfriend and I moved into a house with a couple of roommates near downtown in a big city in Michigan. I had sent him to the store for some staples while I started unpacking. He texted me just after getting to the store saying he had the weirdest thing happen in the parking lot, but he would tell me when he got home. 10 minutes later, he texted again, saying he was super creeped out and jokingly said, "If I'm not on my way in 5, send help." This is normal for his kind of humor. When he got home, he told me that on his way from the parking lot, a man stopped him offering compliments on his beard. It happened a lot, so he didn't think much of it. This guy was dressed as if he were a lawyer or a real estate agent with nice shoes and a nice watch. Very clean cut, so he wasn't uncomfortable. He said thanks and began walking inside. The guy continued walking with him, asking where he was from, what he did for a living, and if he had kids or a wife. My boyfriend's gut lit up like fireworks, and after working in mental health, he knew to trust it. He made up answers and told him to have a nice day. The man said, "If you are ever interested in a new line of work, you're just the guy we're looking for." My boyfriend continued walking without responding and didn't look back. A few minutes into shopping, he noticed the same man was appearing in the same aisles as him, but would then turn around and go another way. At one point, when he texted me, he said he was sure the man snapped a photo of him from the other end of the aisle. We both commented on the craziness and said, "That's some trafficking shit," but let it go, as it was over now and we didn't really want to believe it. Days later, we ran to the store to pick up some late night snacks. We parked the car what felt like miles from the store. My boyfriend's the worst, lol, and began walking in. Thankfully, I don't really startle easily when we are out together because we both conceal carry, so I know if somebody tried to attack either of us, we are definitely prepared on some level. But I still jumped when a man's voice yelled out my boyfriend's name and added, "And his pretty wife." My boyfriend said, "Keep walking and don't hesitate." Thankfully, I knew what he meant, and I hauled my ass into the entryway of the store as I watched them walk and talk while watching for any suspicious people or cars around them. When they were almost inside, I went in the store and started chatting with the greeter so he didn't get a chance to talk to me. The man again showed up in aisles we were in, and at one point looked to be texting on his phone, but was holding it up in front of him. I'm almost positive that he took a photo of us. We didn't finish getting snacks and just left the store. I waited with the greeter as my boyfriend got the car so I didn't have to walk through the dark lot. I'd been a powerlifter at that point for a little over a year and was in great shape. I was in the gym every day at the same time due to my work schedule and usually had my girl roommate with me. But today I was alone for a quick and light lifting session. I wasn't a minute into my gym time when the same guy walked in. I had never seen him there before and instantly felt like vomiting. I texted my boyfriend, but he was away for the military, so he was now panicking from a distance. "Remember your training and keep your cool." He wasn't in gym attire and didn't have a bag with him. We were also at the gym furthest from the area we were from. They had the best equipment for my personal needs and gains, so I'm not sure why he would have chosen it, as he didn't have the "I love the gym" vibe. He came over and said hello, and I politely said hello back, but didn't continue the conversation. He said a few more things, and a guy from a few machines over, I think, could tell I was uncomfortable. He came over and pretended to be my friend, asking if I was ready to go. I said yes and just needed to grab my things. The creeper man asked where my husband was, and I pretended not to hear him as I kept walking. When I came out, he was gone. But my new best fake friend was waiting on the bench outside the locker room. He said that the man had left, but he had let the staff know what happened, and they said he wasn't even a member, but said he was there to pick up his girlfriend. My new BFF walked me to my car and I switched gyms. Thankfully, we now live far, far away from the city, and I've never encountered him again, and neither has my boyfriend. I honestly believe that they were trying to recruit him to make big money selling women, and that I was just a bonus woman to sell. Thankful for strangers who stand up and save women. Y'all will never realize just how important you are. I was just fresh off a major split up when some friends of mine encouraged me to use Tinder. After witnessing my friend use it himself, I decided to give it a go. What could go wrong, I thought. I spent hours on hours, swiping and swiping. Some matched, some didn't. It was somewhat fun. And then swiped Linda, and we matched. A decision that I ended up regretting. We spoke for a few weeks on and off and got to know each other. She seemed like a nice enough girl. She was a bit older than me, yet looked a whole lot younger. She wasn't fussed out about going out for a meal or a cinema trip or anything traditionally romantic, so we arranged to meet up at a bar instead. At first glance, she was barely recognizable from her profile picture. She looked a lot older and had clearly gained a lot of weight. Already the first red flag was starting to show. That was not the major problem though. We got our drinks and got into some good conversation. We seemed to have a lot in common. Maybe too much. In my instincts, I had the impression that she perhaps did some research on me somehow and was trying her best to impress me. There came a point of awkward silence. I thought of something to say to kind of break the silence, but she already beat me to it. "Let's talk about sex," she said. I was too stunned to get my head around how forward and straight to the point she was. She asked me about my sex life and what stuff I'd got up to with my previous partners. We exchanged our stories. To be honest, mine didn't seem half as exciting as her dramatic one, so I just made stuff up. I never felt comfortable talking about this to someone on a first date, especially. It was at this point she would reveal something to me that made me sick from the pit of my stomach. She told me that she liked bondage and that she liked to torture and abuse people just for fun. One story in particular, she told me that she had tricked a man into getting into bed with her and how shocked he was to lie down on a bed full of thumbtacks. At this point, I was quickly slurping my drink and getting my excuses ready to leave. Then she said her final story. She told me that the only week before meeting me, she'd met a man from Tinder and got him to take her to his own flat. She said that she was well prepared and had a bag full of items in her car, that she said were bondage tools. Then to my horror, she told me that she had him wrapped up in a cling film, over and over again, from head to toe until he was almost mummified, and then just left him there on his own in the flat and abandoned him. She laughed as she impersonated his mumbles and his pleas for help. He's probably dead by now, she said, chuckling as she sipped her drink. At this point, I decided to leave. There is no more point in staying. I didn't even want to question if this was a joke or not. I just got up and left. She attempted to kiss me, but I swerved out of her way. I just got up and left as soon as I could. Safe to say, I never want to see her again, and I hope I never do. I've only told one person this, and after reading the stories on the sub, I didn't think mine was creepy enough, but I think that's just me convincing myself it's not that bad to minimize the memory of it and not think about what could have happened to me. During the height of COVID, I, 20s female, decided to get some fresh air after work and go for a walk at a nearby trail that parallels a side road and highway. The parking lot for this section of the trail is very small, with only 3 parking spots in the lot. When I pulled in, there was a black Suburban already there in the middle spot, so I parked to the right of it and stayed in my car texting, browsing Reddit, essentially procrastinating my walk. After a few minutes, a man in his mid-30s gets out of the black Suburban and opens the hood of his car, and makes multiple trips back and forth from the hood to his trunk, seemingly looking for something. Each time he passes between our cars, I can feel him looking inside at me as he passes my window. I become uneasy with the man, so I resolve to not get out until he's gone. About 20 minutes pass of him continuing to look in the hood of his car, walking to his trunk and passing between our cars while trying to catch my attention. I avoid eye contact throughout. Now, I was going through something in my life at the time that in this moment put me in the mindset of, I'm not going to let my discomfort with this man get in the way of me living my life, while simultaneously convincing myself that I'm probably overthinking, overanalyzing and assuming the worst when this guy is probably just a normal dude. After my internal debate is over, I resolve to get out of my car and go for a walk. Immediately after I get out, I ask him if he's having trouble with his car. He says no. My logic in talking to him is to feel him out, to decide whether it's safe to embark on a solo walk with this guy who would see exactly where I went. His car had some sort of government tags which made me more at ease, and I asked about the tags, to which he gave a long-winded explanation I don't remember. He then said, "Can I have a hug?" And I know this was so stupid of me, but I was so isolated feeling during COVID that I figured he felt the same and that we somehow recognized that. I was desperate for human contact, I think, and I said, "Sure." Very, very stupid of me, I know. It's October, so we're both wearing coats. Mine was long and went down to my calves, but was unzipped. When we hugged, his hands and arms went inside my jacket around my waist, instead of hugging me outside my coat. Once his hands were in, he quickly proceeded to feel my body down from the waist to my butt. I immediately pulled away and said, "That was weird, I'm going on my walk now." I was panicked but didn't want to do anything that would make him act with urgency and escalate the situation. He was upset when I pulled away from that hug and asked if I wanted to hang out later, and he suggested that we add each other on Snapchat. Again, I didn't want to upset him, so I let him request to add me. After that, I immediately said, "Okay, I'm going for my walk now. Bye." I should have gotten in my car and walked out of there. I speed walked out of view and instantly wished I'd gotten in my car, as I now had no idea where this guy could be. My skin started to crawl and I felt very much in danger out there in the woods. I sprinted through some dense bushes and crouched down so I was out of view. My heart was racing. About 30 seconds later, he came running along the trail frantically trying to catch up to me. I stayed off the trail and ran through the woods to some thick bushes by the parking lot and stayed there a while to make sure the coast was clear back to my car. Not long after, the man returns to his car, gets in and turns on the engine and drives down the side road that parallels the trail. He slowly drives back and forth on the side road, turning around and starting over probably 3 times, seemingly looking for me in the spots I'd have been along the trail if I had been steadily walking since the time I started my walk. After about 5 minutes of my heart beating out of my chest as I watched this creep search for me, he gives up and turns onto the highway and speeds off in the opposite direction from where he said he lived. The second he was out of sight, I sprinted to my car as fast as I could and couldn't believe what had just happened. I drove home in a silent state of shock and numbness and haven't let myself think about it too much ever since. Freaking terrifying. I can't let myself acknowledge that now. I hope somebody can learn from the mistakes I made during this encounter. So, stay safe out there, everybody. When I was 15, I found a job in a local newspaper for a live-in babysitter. It was summer and I wanted to make some money. I lived in a rural area and did not have transportation to get to a mall or fast food place to work. The usual jobs for teens. There was no public transportation where I lived and no jobs in the rural town I lived in. I called the number for the live-in babysitting job and a man answered. I found out that he was a divorced man with 2 young children. They were school age, elementary school, and were home for summer vacation, and he needed somebody to watch them while he was at work. He spoke to my mom on the phone and she agreed to allow me to do the live-in job. As an adult, I questioned so many of her decisions and certainly this one. He picked me up and drove me to his house, and while driving, he told me that he was engaged. He said that his fiancée was his former babysitter and she was a few years older than I was. As a 15-year-old, this did not set off any alarm bells. I just thought it was weird that somebody my age would want to be with an old man. He was probably in his late 30s to mid-40s. I thought it was weird when I was taking the children for a walk and a woman who lived in the neighborhood looked at me in an odd way, like something was wrong about me walking with those children, and when I smiled and waved, she just looked away and ignored me. I didn't give it a lot of thought then, just seemed weird. The house was a split-level home, a style where the floor levels are split. The main living area and the bedrooms were on the top level, and the lower level just had a living room area and a single bedroom. That was my assigned room. Not long after I began living in the home to babysit for this guy, he knocked on my bedroom door after I'd gone to bed. I was kind of freaked out, and I opened the door partially to ask what he wanted. He acted all friendly and asked me if I wanted a beer, like he was cool with that. I simply said no, and waited for him to leave and shut the door. The next day I told him that I no longer wanted to do the job and had him take me back home. I didn't fully understand at the time that he was a predator who was trying to groom me into having a relationship with him, but I knew enough to know that something wasn't right about the situation and that he was creepy and something told me to get out of there. I was around 12 when this happened. It was a Saturday morning and my parents were going out of town for the weekend. They left my older brother to babysit, but as soon as they left, he did too. Great brother, I know. So I'm sitting in the living room watching TV when the doorbell rings. Instead of looking through the peephole like a normal person, I fling open the door eager for company. I thought it would be my neighbor, not 2 middle-aged men looking down at me. Are your parents home? I don't even hesitate when I tell them. No, they're actually out of town for the weekend. Wow, if I could slap a child, I would go back and slap myself silly. They exchange glances, and the older-looking man says, "Well, I'm your landlord, and we need to come inside to check a few things out." That's when I realize how much trouble I'm in. I know my landlord. He's a friend of the family, and he is not either of the men sitting in front of me. I'm so thankful for quick thinking because I tell them, "Yes, but I need to grab something first," and before they could reply, I shut the door and deadbolted it. I run to the kitchen, grab the phone, and dial my mom's number. I remember thinking, please pick up, please pick up. She does, and the second I hear her voice, I break down. There are 2 guys at the front door and they want to come in. One said he's the landlord, but it's not Mario, and I'm scared, so come home. Then I hear pounding on the window. My mom hears it too because the next thing she tells me is, "Dad is on the phone with the police and I need you to tell them that. Shout it at the top of your lungs that the cops are on the way. They know you were home alone and they need to know that you won't be for long. I'll be there in 20 minutes. My parents are an hour away and how they made it home as fast as they did, I'll never know. But through my tears, I yell as loud as I can. The cops are on their way. "Hey, we weren't going to hurt you. No need to cry. It's okay, we'll leave." Then silence. It seemed like a lifetime, but was no less than 10 minutes when the police arrived. I will always remember the female officer who spoke with me. She calmed me down and applauded my quick thinking on shutting the door. She told me to never open the front door again unless it was someone I knew, and even then not to do it if I was home alone, which I wasn't for a very long time after that. My parents pulled into the driveway like a bat out of hell, and my mom hugged me tighter than she ever had before. I was crying. She was crying. I got a lecture on opening the door for strangers and how lucky I was to be alive. And my brother got yelled at and grounded. Not that he cared much. He moved out shortly after. The cops took a report and surveyed the area for the two men but never found them. I learned my lesson that day. I have no idea who they were or what their intentions were, and I don't care to ever find out. So I moved into a duplex with my ex about 3 years ago in what we thought was a safer part of the city. One of our neighbors, Amber, works in the duplex rental office, and her husband, Ed, was at the time fresh out of prison. Later, we would see all of the swastika tattoos and had been doing and continues to do landscape work for the rentals, like mowing the lawns, cutting down trees, and other than that, he is home mostly doing odds and ends things, like tinkering with his mower or truck or something. They both are super nice people, very kind and loving towards others, and always offer to help out. We have smoked weed together a few times. Ed smokes way more than Amber and have talked about all kinds of things, so I thought I could trust them and felt very safe being their neighbor. I once mentioned how sometimes when I'm alone, I hear steps in the attic over my room and what sounds like a chair being dragged. How sometimes the noise follows me around the house and always freaks me out to the point of calling somebody, just to feel a bit safer until the noises die down. Ed said, "What, you think we're spying on you?" In a laughing way, but it creeps me out. So then I break up with my boyfriend and he moves out. This is recent, so a few months ago. Ed started texting me asking me if I wanted to hang out while Amber was still at work. I declined every time, finding different excuses because I still felt uncomfortable around him. Then he asked if I wanted to do it with him because he thinks Amber is cheating on him. I definitely shut that down and it was awkward. I didn't tell Amber because I didn't want to get kicked out or have some horrible awkward tension, and I hate confrontation, so I kept quiet. That's when I started to hear things in the attic above my room more often. It freaked me out even more when I woke up to a loud bang outside my front door at about 3 or 4 a.m. And when I went to examine it, there was a small lockpick outside my door on the ground, but nobody was around. I kept the lockpick, and the next day I texted a picture of it to Amber to let her know I thought somebody was creeping around, and she said, "Oh, that's Ed's. That's his ice pick. Not a lockpick, sweetie. Nobody can pick your Deadpool with that." But I know the difference between a 4-inch skinny-ass lockpick and an ice pick. I'm so scared to be alone here, especially at night. Our attics connect, and it's not outlandish to think he could be up there spying on me. I even found a freshly drilled hole in the ceiling of my room. I just put wadded up paper in it and try not to think of it. I honestly hope nothing comes of it and I'm just being paranoid. And for everybody saying to call the police, I really have no evidence. I have the lockpick still and pictures of my door being messed with, but when I've gone into the attic, it's been completely empty. I've never gone in alone because its opening is in my garage and there is no ladder, so it requires 2 people. But as of now, it is a gaping hole above my washer and dryer and very hard to get into without good upper body strength. I'd call my ex to come home when the dragging would start, and by the time he got there, it would be cleared out. So I'm hesitant to report anything with no evidence. This is 100% true, by the way. I'm staying with my boyfriend until I move out in a few weeks, despite my neighbors being upset that I'm leaving. To address another thing, I didn't see any swastika tattoos until months after I had been hanging out on their back porch to smoke with him. He had his shirt off for the first time, and there were at least 3 on his body. Confused me because Amber and Ed are super Wiccan. She has Wicca tattoos all over and stuff, and so I believe maybe his tattoos were for protection in prison, maybe. Either way, after that, I stopped hanging with them and would only speak to them if we were both outside at the same time. I'll try not to make this too long, but I want to put this out there for kids and parents. Not even your employer can be trusted. So it was the summer of 2004. I was 15 at the time, working weekends at a skate park, running the registers and keeping up shop. I was the only female employee there. The reason I got the job, I thought at the time, was because I used to hang out there a lot prior to being offered her position. They used to host events and hardcore/rock shows a ton. Those were extremely fun, and it was the place where all my friends gathered for a good time, so we got to know the owners pretty well. Now the two guys that owned the shop were in their 40s, overweight and balding. Typical older white guys, but they were extremely nice. Let's call them Doug and Mark. Doug was always more serious about the business, always trying to come up with ideas to better it and rarely joking around. He was also married with kids. Mark, on the other hand, seemed like Doug's minion. He was usually out running errands, making calls or cleaning the shop. He was a single guy. He was very outgoing and silly, so we always had fun with him around, until one day when the fun stopped. Before I tell you about the scariest moment of my life, I'll inform you of the events, or I'd like to call them red flags leading up to it. On one occasion, we were hosting a show where a local metal band was playing. There were lots of people there. Kids and adults alike were skating and running up and down the ramps and bowls, just generally having a good time. Then Mark suddenly came up behind me as I was talking with my friend Katie. He picked me up and swung me over his shoulder and started tickling me and spinning me around, right in the middle of the crowd. I laughed it off and was yelling for him to stop in a giggly voice, but I was honestly a bit creeped out as he had never touched me before, even in a friendly way. Even at 15, I found it inappropriate for a man in his 40s to be so touchy with me. After about a minute, he put me down and was laughing and apologizing. I didn't think much of it anymore and thought maybe I was overreacting. A week or two went by and I noticed Mark was giving me flirty looks and sticking his tongue out at me when he was around. Again, I didn't think much of it as he was a super nice guy. I thought he was just being funny. One day Mark called me into the back. We had two doors right behind the register that led to our stock room. As Doug sat at the register on a business call. When we got to the back room, he picked me up, set me on the washing machine, and told me he wanted to kiss me. I automatically shut him down. He then tries to persuade me to lift up my shirt for him. At this point, I'm really scared and I'm just hoping Doug comes through those doors any second. Again, I firmly tell him no, as I hop down and proceed to walk to the shop front again. That's when Doug opens the door and asks, "Hey, what are you guys doing? Did Mark show you our butterfly collection?" I just respond with, no, and I walk out. The two follow me. The rest of the day was pretty uneventful, and I just wanted to end. I usually get off work around 6 or 7, but around 5, Doug asked me to go with Mark to run some errands. He jokingly said, "Take my credit card, but don't give it to Mark." All I could think about was how awkward this ride was going to be, as we hadn't talked since the incident earlier that day. I was really dreading this trip, but I had no idea what was about to unfold. We get in the car and drive by my high school, and once we get to it, which is on the other side of town, in a medium-sized, busy city about 5 minutes away from my house, as we pull into the back parking lot on a Saturday, I ask him what we were doing here. He responds by saying, "I'm scouting out a new area for a skate park. It's behind the school here." This is when I start to get nervous, but I'm hoping it's true because I did know they were trying to expand locations at the time. He gets out of the car and motions for me to get out and come along. I hesitantly do so. We start walking to the back of the school, and he's just talking about his visions for the new park. Nothing very serious. That's when we approach the woods. Not a wooded area. Straight up dense forest-like woods. Ones you can barely walk through. That's when he says, "Take my hand. Come on. I'll show you a spot." This is when the alarms go off in my head, and I realize I could be in real danger if I go with this creep. In my head, I'm contemplating running or just going along with him because I didn't know which one would make my situation worse at the time. I now know I probably should have run. This pondering seemed like it went on forever, when in reality it was probably only a few seconds. Thankfully, I paused a second before making any decisions because that's when my cell phone rang. I honestly forgot I had it on me at the time. It was my mom asking me if she could pick me up early so we could go to dinner. That's when I tell her with a sense of urgency, "Yes, I'm at the high school. Come get me now." I think she could hear the fear in my voice and left immediately because she was there in less than 5 minutes. During those 5 minutes, I tell Mark I have to go and wait on my mom. He seemed upset but agreed and walked me to the front steps of the school to wait. He didn't say bye or anything. He just suddenly walked briskly to his car. My mom showed up a few minutes later. I hop in quicker than I've ever done anything in my life. I know I must have been shaking. I tell her I'm not in the mood to eat and just drop me off at home. She asked me if I'm okay and I said yes, and that I and a coworker were just there scouting for a new spot. I get dropped off at home and I'm just in shock and full of fear. I quit working there that day. I never went back and I didn't explain anything to anyone, and I've only ever told my boyfriend and a couple friends about this. I'm 100% convinced, looking back on all the red flags and the fact that Doug didn't seem to trust Mark. Doug was actually a decent guy, that if I'd gone into those woods, I wouldn't be here today. It's very weird when you survive something like that. It's never really seemed real to me, but it very much was. I have a 12-year-old daughter now, and I try to teach her about safety and predators all the time. That kind of thing can change you and change the parent you become. An update to this was that about 2 years later, Mark called my house phone. I don't know how he got my number and told me that he was in Istanbul, Turkey, and about to open a skate shop there. I just said, "Please don't call me anymore," and hung up. Luckily, my nightmare was over after that, but hearing from him was like talking to the devil. I hope the man is dead or in jail so he can't hurt anybody else. I've always wondered if Doug ever found out about Mark and if maybe Mark had to flee the country for a crime he committed, landing him in Istanbul. This turned out to be longer than I intended, but the point is, as a woman or girl especially, never trust anyone who's been a creep to you. I don't trust much of anyone anymore. I've lurked for a while on the subreddit and wanted to share one of my creepy encounter stories. I've been attacked unfortunately a few times living in London, but this was the first and the scariest. I was 8 years old visiting my grandparents who lived in London. At the time I didn't live here yet and was just visiting for the summer. I was on a day outing with my parents and our visiting America friend, let's call her Laura. My dad grew up in London, so he wanted to take us sightseeing, and we had done the Tower of London and a few other must-sees, and we were wandering through the Oxford Street area window shopping. I remember trailing slightly behind my parents for just a moment and looking into a busy cafe as I walked. It had a counter bar where two large ladies were perched on pedestals eating ice cream. All of a sudden, I remember watching these two ladies fall to the side on their chairs onto the floor, in slow motion almost. It was like a dream sequence, and I recall the music from the cafe sounding like it was underwater and slowed down, momentarily. Except they didn't fall to the floor, and actually it was me. All I remember next is a huge shooting pain in my back, and Laura screaming over me while I watched my mom sprinting away through the busy forming crowd, full of shocked faces, looking at me with concern. My dad was on his phone, and I remember being angry because mobile phones were new at the time, and he was non-stop on his. I later found out he was calling the police, not work. So what actually happened while I thought these fat ladies were falling off their chairs was a homeless man in a heavy coat had come out of the crowd, picked me up by the coat collar, and slammed my body down into the pavement. My mom had immediately run after him, chasing him down a busy London street until he pulled a huge knife on her, and somehow she and three men nearby managed to disarm and hold him until the police arrived, which was apparently around 2 minutes. At the time, I literally had absolutely no recollection of being attacked. I was excited to ride in an ambulance and a police car and go to the station. I asked to see a cell and remember getting given a pen by a police officer. I remember being in a bit of pain but couldn't understand the fuss over me by the pandemic. Boy, did the pain hurt later on. I must have had some sort of adrenaline going on where I was in shock and feeling nothing. It's amazing how a child's mind works when in protection mode. As a side note, apparently I did wake up screaming for months every night after, saying this man was in my room according to my mom. I only remember it happening once. I in fact had a cracked rib and had giant black bruises all over my chest and back from the attack, from the impact of the floor and his grip. Later in life, I can remember his face quite clearly, and I remember how high he picked me up to throw me down. This memory was triggered by receiving the birthday bumps as a teen, and it all came rushing back in the most bizarre way. Anyway, to explain my title, this man had in fact been using that large knife for a long time to murder people at night and had attacked a few other little girls in public but had gotten away. The police had been looking for him for months, and it just so happened that this dude didn't count for my slightly insane but fearless mom. So my Let's Not Meet encounter happened 7 years ago. I haven't really spoken about it since it happened, as I kind of just wanted to move on, and I was really unnerved by the whole experience. I was 25. I am female, and I was working a job as an admin assistant, office worker to tide me over and pay my bills until I eventually figured out what the career of my dream was. I was tired of the job. I'd been there about a year when this happened, and believe me, when the creepy shit went down, I was certainly incensed to get myself on a decent career path and the heck out of that place. So you understand my old workplace building, which will give you a clear picture of how this began. I worked in a somewhat old building with a few floors, and on each floor were numerous office spaces that were rented out by different companies. It was a pretty open plan building, some parts more dilapidated than others, and it was in serious need of refurbishment to bring it A, up to health and safety standards, and B, cosmetic standards for the general public. How the offices on my floor were set out meant that our small office, which only consisted of 4 to 5 workers on different days, was situated at the front of the building with access through the front and back of the building. But nobody really used the back. Our staff quarters, as we called them, the lunchroom, were situated at the back of the building, and being an older style building meant there was a long hall and lots of space between the office and the staff quarters. Staff quarters were used only for lunch breaks, and as we were such a small office, we all rotated our lunch breaks so that only one person was off for lunch in the lunchroom at a time. Nobody else really used the lunchroom, as they preferred to go out and get lunch from the nearby shops, but as I had a shorter lunch break, it was always me, alone in the lunchroom at the back of this old creepy-ass building by the rear entry point. Other parts of the building were now under refurbishment, so there was a lot of upheaval in certain spaces and areas, but we managed to retain ours as normal for a while, before building work was scheduled to begin on our floor. Bear in mind that the lunchroom was so far back from the main offices that nothing could be heard or seen that way. There were only 2 companies on the ground floor where I was situated. The other one was on the other side of the building and used the front entrance, but we rarely saw them and certainly didn't keep track of their staff members or clients, and there was no need for us to see who was going in and out. Anyways, I digress. I was sitting in the lunchroom one day eating, heater going as it was freezing, minding my own business, when out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow quickly sweep past the door from the light underneath it. It wasn't unusual for new clients to be wandering around looking for a specific office they required. As we were on the ground floor, there was often a slew of stupid people wandering the corridors aimlessly looking for the office they required. We did have a code entry system on the front door and a telephone system, so you could press the office you needed to get into and it would call through, and they would let you in so people couldn't just walk in without being let in, if you get me. We also had a code for workers to use to get through the front door. As I said, the back door wasn't much used apart from the odd worker who had a set of keys for it, and it was completely unmonitored. I wasn't too startled even when the lunchroom door opened this particular day, and a smart-looking man put his head round, suited and booted and smelling like expensive cologne. I honestly was more embarrassed to see somebody as attractive peering in, as I was sat there with mayo splattered on my shirt and a mouthful of bread, looking in absolute state. But hey, I didn't usually see anyone back there, and I am a messy eater, I admit. "Can I help you?" I asked him, trying to clean myself up. He laughed and said I looked like the one who needed help, and I immediately laughed back, aware that he was still at the door and not imposing on me in any way. Yet, when I laughed along with him, he seemed to take that as an invitation to come right in and sit opposite me at the table. And to my surprise, he took some food out of his expensive-looking leather bag and started brazenly eating a sandwich. "Hey, I'm the HR manager for such and such company upstairs, and every time I go out to get my lunch, I always wonder who is sitting in here alone, so I thought I'd just have a look," he said, still eating and seemingly very calm and chill. The weird thing about him was that he seemed so normal. Nothing about this guy made me worried. In fact, it was nice to have some company on my lunch break, as most of the time I just sat scrolling through creepy news articles on my phone. We carried on chatting, mostly about mundane stuff. I asked him about his job in the company upstairs, and he asked me about mine. I asked him about where he usually took his lunch breaks. You know, just normal small talk, but it felt more comfortable than that. This guy was super charming. He made me feel at ease. That part is the most chilling to me. I was totally at ease and unguarded. It became a pretty regular thing for him to join me in the lunchroom, and honestly, I was beginning to get a bit of a crush on this guy. He had a good job, was attractive, and was very charming and normal. I began looking forward to seeing him. Stupid, I know. A little attention from an attractive guy, but hey, I was single and not bad looking. So I figured, why couldn't I have a harmless little crush? He had told me his name was Alan, and honestly, I didn't intend to take it anywhere with him. I was totally happy single at the time, and I was getting some minor flirtations from him, but nothing that confirmed he had a crush on me too, or wanted to take it any further. He moaned about the building work taking place and how the whole upstairs offices were a mess. Their break rooms, etc., had all been gutted, and he was glad to have somewhere to eat his lunch that nobody else knew about from his office. Again, not your average creeper, I know. At this point, I didn't even think the guy was a creeper. Until one day, things took a turn. Alan stormed into the lunchroom one Thursday, and I swear, in his eyes, I saw the look of a caged animal. You know that crazy look. You know that restless and jittery and hyper look. It kind of says somebody isn't thinking straight at all. I immediately had my guard up a bit because I had never seen him like this before. It freaked me out the way he stormed into the room, slammed his bag down on the table, and started ranting about how his boss was a jerk and that he wished he could gut him like a fish. All while pacing around, running his hand through his hair, beads of sweat forming on his brow, and pure rage in his eyes. I'd always thought his eyes were so pretty before. They were a steely blue, but right now they looked darker and more imposing than ever. I tried really hard to pacify him and calm him down. I was repeatedly saying it would be alright and to calm down and let's just eat. And whatever had happened, I'm sure could be sorted out. He slumped down in a chair and I went over to him, kind of standing beside him but obviously over him, and I put my hand on his shoulder to console him. With that, he flew up and pushed me back against the wall. I was stunned and I couldn't speak. His body was pressed against me, and almost through his rage, he was in a trance-like state. After he pushed me back against the wall, he just stood there, his hands holding my wrist down by my side. Almost like he was taking some weird comfort from the fact that he had me up against the wall. He buried his face into my neck and I was frozen to the spot, like, what the heck is going on here? I always said I would never be one of those girls in an emergency or dangerous situations to freeze. But honestly, like, I had never been in this type of situation, and I could tell he was really volatile in this precise moment. I really didn't know what he was going to do, so I didn't want to risk pissing him off more and then have him attack me or something. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, his face buried in my neck, still holding my wrist quite forcefully, when all of a sudden, he licked my neck and said, "You smell nice." Yes, he actually licked my neck. Seemingly calmer, that's when I decided, nope, I am not standing here with this person who was clearly unstable, holding me up against a wall in anger, and then suddenly being all soft-spoken again and licking my neck in this weird predatory way. That's what it felt like to me right in that second. I felt so stupid for starting to eat with this guy and not even question why he was coming to our lunchroom. I told him to get off me. I was leaving. At that point, I was prepared to take a beating. It shouldn't have been like that, but I honestly didn't know what his deal was. Was he crazy? Was he just emotional or upset? Was he trying to seduce me? Was he going to hurt me? I don't know. I realized I didn't even know this guy. We spent half an hour to an hour in each other's company, passing the lunch hour, but I didn't really know anything about him as a person. It had been a couple of weeks of lunches together, and I realized how short an amount of time that was to really have any idea about this person. He let go of my wrists, and then in the most sinister tone I'd ever heard, he said, "You always seem like you wanted it from me, you damn whore." Before I could respond, he grabbed his bag and stormed out of the lunchroom, and tears just sprung to my eyes. I cracked the door open to make sure he'd left, and I just sprinted back to the front of the building where my office was and told the guys in there everything that had just happened. They were absolutely fuming. They knew this guy had been hanging around me in the lunchroom, but as I'd always been comfortable with it and thought Alan was okay, nobody ever thought anything of it. They actually thought it was hilarious every day when I came back from lunch all tongue-tied after my encounter with attractive Alan, as they now referred to him. They insisted we march upstairs and put in a complaint as company, and I knew that even if I didn't agree, they would march up themselves to do it. Eventually, I agreed, after feeling shaky and vulnerable, but I knew I didn't want to have to face Alan after the incident in the lunchroom. I went up regardless, flanked by two guys I worked with, one of whom was my immediate boss. As we began explaining the situation, it was evident that something was wrong. The woman and the man from the upstairs company looked really confused when I explained about their HR manager, Alan, and what he had done. They explained that their HR manager was a female called Jules and that I must have been mistaken because there was no Alan that worked at the company. We asked every single company in the building, and not one company had an Alan working for them and never had. We eventually came to the conclusion that Alan had been coming in every day for lunch, but with absolutely no idea why or what for. We also didn't know if he had the building code or a set of keys for the back end. We didn't know where he had initially come from. Unnoticed, wandering freely around the building. The locks were changed, the code was changed, and CCTV was installed, as it never had been before. Plus, security checks were put in place at the building after this incident, with everybody entering the building being monitored. I never ever saw Alan again, and I still to this day don't know why he was coming in the building every day, having lunch with me, pretending to be an office worker, and I don't know what happened that day when he flipped. So yeah, this isn't the usual creeper on Let's Not Meet, but Alan, let's never meet again. I'm back with another story from my childhood. I tried to add more details that I can remember since the last one got requests to be more specific. I was about 14 or 15 years old, walking back from one of my friend's house at around 10 p.m. on a school night. Trisha's father was a police dispatcher, and the small, medium town I grew up in didn't have much of a force to speak of. I could run to the station in 2 minutes flat, and the park I frequented was next to it. It was also the same building as the Justice Department. Between Trisha's house and my own was less than a mile. I was halfway there when I could see a car, a Ford of a dark color, slowly roll through an intersection in front of me. I knew it was a Ford because it looked like a normal unmarked police car. It stopped for a good 30 seconds in the middle of said intersection as I walked towards it. When I got to it, I sort of stopped. Not as much scared as I was plain confused. I walked around the back of it. The lights inside were turned off as well, and the dark shape in front of the seat sat very still. I kept my ears perked, listening to the sound of the car's tires inching across the gravel. I didn't want to turn, but I could hear the low purr of the engine behind me, following me ever so slowly. Now I was worried. But Dad didn't teach me to panic, especially for how close I was to the police station. I took a deep breath and broke into a full-on sprint across the road, passing through people's lawns and yards, and through an open lot until I could see the 2-lane road that cut our town in half. Across that road was the station. I didn't even want to look behind me again and see if the man was there, because I heard his car. No lights flooded the ground or the space around me. He still had them turned off. I kept running into the street. It was so late and there were no cars on the road. I pushed open the gate separating the park and the outside, flying through it. Breathing hurt. It was winter in the northeast and the cold was biting. When I reached the glass door of the city hall/police station, my heart fluttered. I was safe. It would be okay. I had to ring the bell to get the police to open the double-locked doors. As I did that, I heard a car pull in behind me into the parking lot. It was that same car, and who should step out of it but Trisha's dad, in his police dispatcher's uniform. "Honey, why did you run away from me? I was trying to get your attention. You left your cell phone out." He held it out, walking towards me, proving his good intentions. His smile was wide and it was supposed to be reassuring, but it chilled me. Nobody came to the door. I was alone with him still. When he got to me, I grabbed the cell phone and stuffed it into my back pocket. I remember the next thing that happened like it was yesterday. He had coffee on his breath and he smelled like cigarettes. Suddenly, he grabbed my arm and pinned me to the door behind him. "Didn't your..." Insert racial slur here. Daddy tell you to say thank you, pretty girl? I was shocked. Not once have he ever spoken to me like that. They were from Kansas, but he'd never given any indication that he thought like this. Didn't you hear me, girl? He was inches from my face. His grin now a creepy, sadistic sneer. He used his thumb that pinned my arm to touch the side of my breast. The way he said girl still sends a cold shiver down my spine. I've been assaulted before, but Trisha's dad's way of saying girl still haunts me today. I'll hear it in my mind and want to shrink into nothingness, scream at it until it goes away and cry. And just as suddenly he let go and laughed. I didn't know until a police officer knocked on the glass door behind me. He was staring at Trisha's dad. Problem, miss? No problem, officer. She just forgot her cell phone. Trisha's dad answered for me, his normal smile back on his face. He stepped away from me and let go, but I could still feel his hands on my arm. I don't remember what I did. Nod? Whimper? But I blinked on whatever happened until I got home and cried. Never even told my twin sister, Lexi, what went down. Ever since then, he looked at me in the creepiest way. He would do that sneer at me as soon as I walked into the door to their house. I'll never forget how awful that night made me feel. I didn't walk home alone again. Without a knife, I took from my dad's possessions at least. He's always been a creep and has caused a lot of issues with Trisha's mom and him. They're divorced now since this happened almost 10 years ago. Not only was this the beginning of my problems with him, but it was for Trisha too. She and I still keep in very close contact, and she updates me on her situations with them. Apparently he attempted to molest her several times with physical repercussions. She's a strong-willed, physically capable woman and handled herself well. She got the heck out of Dodge as soon as she turned 18. Thankfully, she's an adult now, far away from him, and hasn't seen him in several years. I hope she never does. Hello. First off, I'm very new to posting here, so please let me know if I need to correct anything. This just happened yesterday evening in a small mountain town about 40 minutes outside of the major city that my boyfriend and I live in. We had decided to reserve a jacuzzi at a hot springs resort, just to take some time to relax and enjoy getting out of the city for a few hours. We left the apartment around 6:30, to allow for traffic and make sure we made it to the resort by 8. We had a nice drive up, making conversation and flicking through songs. We arrived about half an hour ahead of schedule, so we decided to sit in the car and wait to check in. When we arrived, I was immediately met with a sense of unease. I didn't tell my boyfriend, but made a mental note of the feeling. I've learned not to brush those feelings off, so I made sure I was a bit more alert during our little trip. We checked in and got all set up in our jacuzzi. The way it was set up was very private, so there was fencing all around us and a door with a lock on it to get into the area. When I first walked in, I was overcome with the feeling that I had to get that door locked as soon as I could. I'm usually a safe person and would have done this anyway, but the feeling of the locked door being a necessity at that moment was rather uncanny. As the night progresses, the sky begins to darken, and my boyfriend and I are remarking on how beautiful the mountains and sky are at this time of the evening. We are making jokes about some crazy mountain man running out of the hills towards us, and I start cracking up. I'm mid-laugh when we hear someone jiggle the door to our jacuzzi area. I stop laughing, and I am immediately struck with a fight-or-flight sense of fear. Now, I've been startled before, but this was just different. I felt legitimately threatened by the energy that whoever was outside of that door was giving off. As the jiggling continued, my boyfriend called out, "Yo, you need something?" The person on the other side began to yank forcefully on the door now, and my boyfriend yelled out, "Hey." I've heard my boyfriend's voice when he gets upset or angry at someone, but this was different. This was the "you really don't want to mess with me" protective type of voice. The jiggling continued for a moment longer and then ceased completely. During this time, I had been about 15 feet away from my clothes, which contained my knife, and was 100% ready to dive for them if the person had broken through the locked door. Since we were only a few minutes away from our time being up anyway, We decided to get dressed as quickly as possible and just book it back to the car. The whole time we were getting ready, up until we drove out of the lot, I could feel somebody watching us. About 100 yards or so away from the resort, there was a park of mobile homes. From our tub, you could easily see these mobile homes if you stood up on the edge of the jacuzzi. That means that whoever was home and looking out their window could see you too. During the whole time we were there, I was the only one who stood up completely, so I'm the only one that anyone in the mobile homes would have seen, making it seem like I was all alone there potentially. Later in the evening, my boyfriend and I were rehashing exactly what had happened and trying to figure out who the heck had tried to get into our jacuzzi. We figured if it had been resort staff, they would have made their presence known and asked to come inside. If it had been another customer and they tried the wrong door, we assumed they would have said something like, "Oh, sorry, wrong door." My boyfriend looked at me and said, "You know, you were the only one who stood up in the hot tub. And with the way it's positioned, somebody in that trailer could have easily been staring right at you." This honestly made my blood run cold for a moment because I knew he was right and I knew in my gut that's probably what happened. I'm a pretty small girl, about 5'5", and I look barely 18, even though I'm actually almost 23 and I weigh about 100 pounds. Overpowering me would be like taking candy from a baby. This realization, coupled with the fact that we both felt so disturbed and uneasy about the whole thing, made me realize whoever was trying to get in there did not have any good intentions. I've thought about sharing this story on Reddit before. The time and place never seemed right until I found the subreddit. I rarely ever think of this. I think I mostly blocked it out. I am female, and when I was 25, I was in a transition period of my life. I was divorcing my husband and moving back to my home state to figure stuff out. My aunt had a small 1,500 square foot, 1950s house in a quiet neighborhood. A doors that stick, squeaky wood floors type of place. She had moved out but couldn't commit to the sale. She was happy to let me live there for a bit. I lived in the house for about 5 months. This house was a single-story home, but it was on a hill, so if you went around the back of the house outside, you could walk through a door in a small basement of sorts that you could stand in. If you were in this small basement and continued to walk toward the front of the house, you would quickly be crouching and then crawling. It was a small concrete storage area, and it was under what was my bedroom. One thing I remember about this place was that it was creaky and not well insulated. The floors were creaky, and when you were down in the basement area, you could sort of see light coming through the cracks in the bedroom floorboards. I maybe went down there once, got creeped out, and left. It was around the back of the house, like I said, and I had no reason to even be back there. Being 25 and recently leaving my jerk husband, I will admit I had a few male suitors visit me in that house, in that creaky, uninsulated bedroom. So I get my dream job, and I am moving out of the house. I'm also moving out of the state. My aunt has one request of me, to turn the water off at the street before I leave. So right before I leave the house, I turn the water off at the street. I come back inside and turn on the tub faucet. No water. I've done my job. However, this is where fate steps in. I left the faucet turned on. Didn't think to turn it back off. I drive away to my new life. A few days later, my aunt calls. She's upset because the water company has called her to say there is an unusually high amount of water running at her home. I promised her that I turned the water off and told her about checking the tub, so I'm out of state. She's out of state. My mom gets recruited to go over and figure out what's going on. Well, come to find out, the neighbor's husband from next door had been kicked out. He was living in the little room under my bedroom. He had strung an electric cord over the fence from his house. He had clothes and a toothbrush. Guess he was bathing in our yard. And when I turned off the water, he went right back out to the street and turned it back on. He had been living right under my bedroom floorboards. I am tense just writing and remembering this. I never ever want to meet this guy. The thought of him right under my feet, listening to me in my bedroom, still gives me chills. March 14th, 2008. I was 7 years old, a junior in high school. I lived in a square-mile suburban town in Nassau County, which is one of the richest counties in America. Life there was very quiet. Not much goes on. I had been struggling with depression and couldn't focus on my schoolwork. I had a paper and a whole bunch of homework I hadn't done the night before, so I woke up at 7 a.m. and made my way downstairs to my mom's room to ask if I could sleep in, catch up on some schoolwork, and go to school late, and she said okay. I woke up around 10 a.m., later than I had anticipated. I walked downstairs, poured myself a bowl of cereal, and said good morning to my poodle. That's when I heard knocking on the door. At first it was regular, calm knocking. I didn't think much of it, but didn't want to answer the door in my pajamas. I picked up the house phone and dialed my mom's phone number. She was at work, as a church secretary. Hey, Mom, are you expecting anybody at the house? Because somebody is knocking on the door. No. Could it be the cable guy? No? Okay, I won't answer it. After I hung up the phone, the knocking continued. It increased and started becoming more rapid and frantic. I peeked through the curtain and saw a bluish pickup truck outside my property, and a man standing at the door. He had a red hat on, a denim jacket, jeans and sneakers. No logos or uniform. I didn't get a good read on his face either. He kept knocking. At this point it was riling up my dog and he was barking on the top of the knocking. I swear, the knocking seemed to go on forever. I checked the locks on the doors to make sure they were secure. Then suddenly it stopped. Quiet. And I hear a creak, the sound of the side gate to my house. My pulse raced. Maybe it's the meter reader. I stood in a panic in the living room. The next thing I heard was shuffling coming from the bathroom. Could it be my cat playing with the shower curtain? I had to check. I walked down the hall and peered around the corner to see inside my bathroom. I'll never forget what I saw. The window in the shower was wide open. In the middle of my bright and sterile bathroom was a dark mess pouring in through the window, one leg at a time. Ah, shit. Do I run outside the front door? What if there are more men outside to chase me down? Side door? Too close to the bathroom. So I bolted up the stairs as carefully and silently as I could. I heard my dog barking incessantly, not in a panic, but excitement. Happiness. I closed my bedroom door behind me as quietly as possible. I didn't shut it all the way so as to not make any noise. Cell phone. I picked it up and wondered who would come quicker, 911 or my mom, who was at work less than a mile away. I dialed her number. In a whisper. Mom, there's somebody in the house. The creak of his footsteps on the stairs. Shit, I had to think fast. I ducked underneath my desk. I could hear one step at a time as he slowly ascended the stairs. It was kind of like a movie. I quickly dialed 911. That's when my bedroom door slowly opened. His head peered around it to scan the room. That was it. He saw me. I dropped the phone before I could hit call and instinctively put my hands over my head as he rushed at me with a crowbar flying through the morning air. Please don't hurt me, I said. Don't scream, don't say anything. With a gloved hand, he struck me in the face, sending my glasses flying. Now I'm blind. Fell to the ground and squatted with my hands over my head. He took my cell phone. I was shaking and my mind was racing. I'm going to die, I thought. He dangled the crowbar over my neck. I could feel the iron tip graze the skin. He was standing over me. How much will this hurt? How long will it take? What will it feel like having a crowbar in my skull? My mom is on the way home. Not her too. This is it. I'm screwed. He rummaged through my things on my desk. Then there was silence. Is he still in the room? How many people are inside my house? I don't want to know. I heard the house getting trashed downstairs, and I could hear my dog jumping and barking at the invader or invaders, and I could hear them hushing him in a baby voice. Quiet again, for what felt like hours. I heard my name, and I was stunned and confused. Heard it again. My mom. I ran down the stairs. The front door was wide open. There she was in my living room. Bursted into tears and told her everything. I was still in a panic. Was he still in the house? Was he hiding? Called 911. They came and investigated. A pillowcase to stuff the items in, my iPod, speakers, a brand new camcorder, laptop, and leather jacket for disguise. Were the items missing? I spoke with a forensic artist. The cops drove me around the neighborhood to take a look at suspects they stopped on the street, but he was never caught. After everything was settled, I needed a shower. I cried when I had to scrub the tub of muddy footprints. My post-traumatic stress terrorized my life. I had to sleep in my mom's room. I kept a knife under my pillow. Everywhere I went, thought I saw the man who robbed me, not only of my personal belongings, but also of my overall sense of safety. It didn't help when at school the principal made an announcement about the break-in on the loudspeaker. He told the entire building that I let my attacker in and referred to him as a gentleman. This twisted the story completely. So much so that a rumor went around school that my attacker assaulted me and that I liked it. A whole lot has happened since then, and now I'm much happier, but I still feel the effects of PTSD today. The scary thing here is that he was a landscaper. My family never had enough money for landscaping, but both of our neighbors did. Landscapers are given access to people's yards, sometimes when they're not home, and have plenty of time to scope out unlocked windows, access points, etc. You probably didn't expect anyone to be home because I didn't answer the door. The moral of the story is to always answer the door. Or if you don't feel safe answering the door, make a noise to signify that you're home. And of course, call the police first. I was looking for a story that I posted a while back, but I think I deleted it on accident. By far, this has one of the craziest and scariest moments of my life, and in light of recent events going on in my life, has resurfaced in my mind. I lived a pretty sheltered life as a child. I'm an only child, and as is sometimes the case with only children, I lived an extremely overprotected life. My mom drilled the stranger danger in my head since preschool and would always stress the importance of being safe. Never go into a bathroom by yourself. Never get into a stranger's car. Never drink from an open bottle. Always ask for permission. Always stay within adults' eyesight. I have to admit that half of the time it went in one ear and out the other. As a preteen, I thought I knew it all and hated the constant nagging. However, I get where she was coming from now. My mom was a recent widow and was adjusting to the role of mom and dad, trying to shield me from the horrors that I am only now beginning to see. We lived in an area that used to be a quaint little dairy town, but over the years had gone downhill and became crime-ridden. The dairy farm fell out of business, and in its place, they constructed homes. It wasn't a bad place to live, but it wasn't the best either. I grew up thinking it was a common occurrence to hear helicopters fly by, announcing that they were looking for somebody. The cross street from my house led to a park that was known for gang activity, where almost every weekend somebody would either be found dead or beaten up. But it was okay because we didn't live on that end of the street, I thought. We knew most of the neighbors, and if we didn't know them by name, we at least knew what they looked like. Despite it not being the best neighborhood, it was pretty quiet overall and we felt safe enough. By the time I was in 7th grade, I finally had gotten some freedoms. My best friend Tiffany and I would take turns spending the night at each other's houses, but most of the time she would come to mine. Tiffany had a little brother that would always pester us, and she liked coming over to my house because we could talk about boys without her little brother trying to eavesdrop. I think my mom preferred it that way too because she was much more lenient with us, knowing that we are safe at our house. She would even sometimes go on her daily walks and leave us home by ourselves for about an hour or so, and we loved this. I'm not sure what happened or what we did this particular day. Probably ate pizza, sat on my front porch, outside as the sun set, and listened to the radio at way too high of a volume. Perhaps this was even one of those nights my mom left us home alone for a while. I wish I could say I saw something out of the ordinary or felt uneasy, but I didn't. After it got dark, we retreated to my room. My room has 2 windows. One faces the backyard and the other faces the street. I like natural light as much as possible, so as usual, the blinds were open. Even though it was now dark outside, which meant people could see in but we couldn't see out, I still left them open. I was too lazy to climb onto my bed to close them and had a false sense of security, knowing there was a tall pine tree directly in front of my window. With the tree in front of the window, I felt protected, almost as if my mom were invisible to the outside world. As the night grew quieter, we decided to build a fort out of sheets and tell scary stories. By this time, it was really late at night, and my mom was fast asleep in her room. After the first story or two, I started to grow uneasy and got up to close the blinds. I was creeped out, thinking somebody could be lurking outside, peeking in, but figured it was all in my head because of the stories we were telling. We got through a couple more classic stories, like the Hook Killer and stuff. Started talking about true ghost stories, things that relatives claimed they saw or heard. Our eyes were watery, hearts pounding, and muscles clenched when suddenly there was loud, furious banging on my bedroom window. It wasn't a knock that grew into a series of louder knocks. It was like an angry one that you felt throughout your body. My heart was pounding in sync with each subsequent knock. I sat there frozen, not knowing what to do. My mind was frantically trying to make sense of the situation. It just didn't make sense that somebody would be knocking on my bedroom window so late at night. We have an iron gate that surrounds our house, and it's pretty loud. I was surprised that we didn't hear the gate open. Even then, the front door is 5 feet from the gate. Why didn't they knock at the door first? My room is all the way in the back and wasn't even the first window with the light on. You pass by 2 other windows before you get to mine. A million questions are running through my head, and my brain comes to the only possible conclusion. It's Tiffany's little brother trying to scare us. Yeah, because it makes sense that a 10-year-old boy walked over to my house in the middle of the night to scare us. In what felt like ages, but was probably only a matter of seconds, I finally came to the realization that it wasn't her little brother. The knocks continued. They were loud and angry, yet nobody was saying anything. We were both frozen in fear. I just wanted to stay hidden in the fort where I couldn't be seen. What if whoever was knocking was peeking in through the cracks in the blinds and watched me as I crawled out from under the sheets? The thought of that made my every muscle weak. And then silence. The knocking had stopped. I felt my body ease up a little bit. Maybe who was ever there had left, and cue teenage brain, we decided to go investigate. My mom was blissfully unaware of what was going on, still fast asleep. We slid out of the fort and tiptoed down the hallway towards the front door. Adrenaline pumped through our bodies as we decided one of us would sneak to the front door and look out the peephole or window and see if we could see something. Neither one of us wanted to be the one to do it, but it was my house, so I volunteered. All the doors were locked and the windows had bars on them. I just had to be as quiet as possible. Beneath every step, I took the wood creaked and groaned. After a few minutes, I finally found myself standing at the front door. My whole torso felt numb as I inched my face closer to the peephole. Holding my breath, I look out and I suddenly feel hot and cold at the same time. I didn't know whether to keep looking out or slink back down. I think a little part of me had convinced myself that the porch would be empty that night, but instead, standing on my porch was an unfamiliar man. I had no idea who this man is, but he is standing awkwardly close to the door. Something about it just didn't seem right. What threw me off the most was that he was just pounding on my bedroom window 15 or so minutes ago, and now he was standing at the front door so calmly and quiet. It was as if the roaring avalanche had turned into a falling feather. With my stomach in my throat, I snuck back to the hallway where Tiffany was waiting for me. All I could say is, "There's a man out there." "Immediately," she says. "Go tell your mom." It wasn't a question, but a demand. We ran into her room and urgently told her, "Mom, someone's knocking." She must have sensed the urgency in my voice because she sprung up and told us to stay in her room with the door closed and instructed us not to open the door no matter what happened. We stood behind that door for what seemed like ages, trying to listen. The front door was too far away, so all we heard was silence. Finally, we hear footsteps coming toward us. It was so quiet around us that I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I about had a heart attack when my mom's bedroom door started swinging open. It was my mom. She told us not to worry about it and that the man was gone. This left me with a million questions, but she was very vague. What did he want? Nothing. Who was he? I don't know. She shooed us back to bed and we complied. The adrenaline had started to wear off and I was now exhausted. We didn't stay up and speculate or talk. That was it, and it was the end of the story. For now, at least. The next day, I was sitting in my room and heard my mom talking to someone. I've always been a very quiet kid. Even as a baby, people would often forget I was around. I'm quiet, but I hear everything. I stopped what I was doing, probably downloading music on Napster or something, and listened. My mom was telling her friend about the man. Apparently, she opened the door and through the screen asked the man if he needed any help. The man stammered as if trying to think up a story and introduced himself as the neighbor. He said that his mom was sick and he was going around asking for money to help buy her medicine. Concerned but also trying to poke holes at his story, my mom asked him what her name was in case my mom knew her. The guy didn't give her an answer, or gave a vague one and then pointed in a general direction, saying they lived at that house over there. My mom didn't buy it. She knew everybody that lived near us and she had never seen this man before. She probably should have just closed the door at this point and told him she didn't have any money on her, but she didn't want to make him mad. She didn't know if he was armed or dangerous and thought, maybe he's just a junkie and will run off if I give him some cash. Luckily, she had fallen asleep in her clothes, so as she reached in her back pocket, she found $5. Change from the pizza we had ordered earlier. She unlocked the screen door and handed him the cash. The man started getting more aggressive and growls. That's all you got? Now, my mom is starting to sense something more sinister in the man. He's not just a junkie, or if he is, he's a very aggressive one. My mom then lies to him and quickly tells the man, yes, this is all I have. We live day to day here and $5 is actually even more than I should spare, but your mom is sick and I feel bad. She definitely needs this money more than we do right now. Not satisfied by her answer, he continues to demand more cash. My mom realizes that this man is not taking no for an answer and begins to bluff. She tells him that she'll go get her husband. Maybe he has some cash on him. We really don't have any more cash, but maybe my husband has some on him. I would hate to leave a neighbor in need. Your mom must really need that medicine, Tim. At once, the man's demeanor changes as he mutters, no, that's okay, and treks out of there. I don't know what would have happened if the man had called her on her bluff, but thinking a man was present scared the heck out of the guy enough to drive him away fast. I grew cold thinking that he probably thought Tiffany and I were home alone. He must have been watching us and was planning on breaking in. Cue teenage brain. Oh, well, he's gone. Gotta go download that Usher album. Disclaimer. I'm not sure if the following event was related, but due to its close proximity to the previous one, I think it's definitely worth mentioning. The following week, I was waiting for Tiffany's mom to pick me up to go to school. We lived 2 houses away, so they would always swing by for me in the morning. I usually would be done getting ready before they arrived, so I would head outside to the front yard and wait for them out there. Sometimes I would go climb a tree in the front and look for the bird eggs. Other times I'd just search for 4-leaf clovers. I was walking around not paying attention to my surroundings when I heard what I can only describe as what I would imagine a gun with a silencer sounds like. A quiet little pew, followed by a loud noise, which I later realized was glass breaking. Stunned, I looked around. What the heck was that? All I saw was a white van drive by. I looked over at my neighbor's house and noticed that the window to their car was completely shattered. Shards of glass everywhere. I still didn't quite put 2 and 2 together until I saw the same white van drive by, the driver staring me down. I felt a sense of unease and wanted to run back inside. For some reason, though, I didn't. I had too much pride and didn't want to give them the satisfaction of knowing they scared me. Also, I thought if I ran inside, they would maybe think I was a snitch and would retaliate more. I played dumb as if I didn't notice anything and they drove by again. And once more after that. Tried to not look at the van as it drove by, but each time it drove by, I could feel the driver's gaze on me. Soon after, Tiffany's mom came by and took me to school. I don't know if the man drove by a 4th time. never told anyone about the van. Luckily, nothing ever happened after that. This happened to a friend of mine who lived in the same neighborhood as me when we were about 8 or 9 years old. My friend E and her family lived just a few houses down the street from mine. We lived in a neighborhood where almost everyone knew each other. The biggest worry we ever had was that some outsider would come into the neighborhood and cause trouble. Some people left their homes unlocked because we felt that safe. There was an incredibly nice family that lived directly across the street from E's house. A mom, a dad, a 16-year-old son, and their other mentally challenged son who was 22 years old. I'll call him Tim. Tim was always home because he wasn't employed due to his disability, but his parents were working full-time, and his brother had school. All day, every day, he would be outside waving and smiling at anyone who drove or walked by. Big smiles, showing all of his teeth and sometimes giggling, just out of the pure excitement and happiness of interacting with other people since he spent most of his time alone. He was not creepy per se. One day, E was sick and didn't go to school. Even though she was only about 8 or 9 years old, E was allowed to stay home sick by herself. Plus, her mom was going to be home around 2 o'clock anyways, since she only worked part-time, and the neighborhood was safe enough. E locked all of the doors except the one that led into the garage. They used this as their front door because it was easier in those cookie-cutter homes to just open the garage, pull in, get out of the car, close the garage, and walk into their house through the unlocked door that led from the inside of the garage to the inside of their home. This is obviously not the safest way to protect your home from intruders, but we literally all did it, as if a flimsy garage door could keep anyone from getting into it if they wanted. The worst part is that they had an outside cat and kept the garage door cracked just enough for him to get inside for his food or shelter if he needed be. So E's asleep, feeling sick and with a fever. All the doors and windows are locked, except the door leading to the cracked garage door. Tim was bound to know she was home alone since he was outside the front of his house all the time. E wakes up to pounding on the front door. Startled, she walks downstairs and looks through the peephole. It's Tim. She cracks the door and he says something along the lines of how he notices everything and would guard her home since she's home alone. She said thanks, but there was no need to, and to have a good day. It was beautiful weather. He looked pissed. He got angry and said, "You think I can't do it because I'm dumb, but you watch and see because I'm not dumb." She said, "Sorry, and I didn't mean it like this, but I have to rest now." She dozed off and woke up to a noise downstairs in the kitchen, the room the door from the garage led into. She hadn't heard the garage door open, but she was sick, so she figured she was deep in sleep and just hadn't noticed. Completely disoriented from time, she looked over at the alarm clock. It was 10:20, way too early for her mom to be home. At that moment, she heard noises from downstairs again. She didn't call out. She had been sleeping in her parents' room and ran into their bathroom, slamming the door loudly. Then she remembered their bathroom door had no lock on it. The noise she made slamming the door alerted the intruder to where in the house she was at, and big footsteps started coming upstairs. She moved quickly and quietly to her parents' closet, which was on the other side of the big room. She closed the doors and hid behind some clothes, all the time thinking how somebody would have gotten inside. She remembered that the garage door was cracked for the cat, slightly but not close enough for a thin person to slip under. Tim walks into the bedroom. Tim is tall and thin. She can see him through the slatted closet doors. She saw that he was holding a knife and did everything she could to not scream. He quickly went to the master bedroom where she was just moments before. These cookie-cutter houses only had about 3 floor plan layouts, so it wasn't hard for him to find. He looked inside the bathroom and didn't see her, then started making loud throaty noises like somebody would if they were frustrated. While pacing the entire house, she stayed in the closet for hours, even after she heard him exit through the front door. She stayed until her mom got home. She was crying hysterically and told her mom what happened. Had she not been so upset and had one of their kitchen knives not been left by the front door, her mom might have blamed it on being delirious from a high fever, because nobody would expect Tim to do this. The police were called and an official report filed. I'm not sure if he had any charges pressed against him, because after she told me the story once, she refused to talk about it again. I overheard her parents a few times talking about the situation, with my own parents, but never heard what the consequences were. He was so traumatized she went to therapy afterward for several years, and still wouldn't talk to anyone about it because she didn't want to remember or relive the experience. We even moved into an apartment together years and years later for college purposes. She never talked about Tim. It was like he never existed, and I never asked. I noticed she always locked the front door, which she should, of course. Always locked the door that led to the patio/balcony, even though we were on the 7th level, and always locked her bedroom door, onto which she added an additional lock. And when she locked all of those doors and the windows, she always checked like 3 times. Every single time. I often wonder if there was more to the story than what he told me. We were kids after all, and sometimes kids don't know how to explain things they don't understand. It's terrifying to think about what his intentions were, and if he perhaps did find E, and something else happened. As horrifying as the experience must have been for her, he made a huge statement in the neighborhood for everyone to be more careful. I will always make sure everything is locked, and I don't ever want to meet you again, Tim. This story extends from 8th grade middle school to my freshman year in college. I'm 24 years old now, so this must have begun in 2008. I was raised in a Korean household with strong Christian beliefs. Every summer and winter, there would be a youth retreat where all the teens in our church would go to one big joint retreat with counselors and teenagers from churches in and out of state. I met my best friend, Hannah, there. She was from Philly and had a pastor who was named Alan. After these retreats, everybody would add each other on Facebook and keep in touch. I remember a day or two after the '08 summer retreat, Pastor Alan would often reach out and ask how my walk with God was going since the retreat and if I ever needed someone to speak to. I could always confide in him. This didn't alarm me at the time because counselors would keep in touch all the time. I always kept our conversations brief considering the fact that I was shy and timid. Over the years, I'd always see Pastor Allen at retreats and was friendly with him. Nothing strange happened other than his persistence with keeping in touch with me on Facebook after retreats. I slowly stopped talking to him, and eventually, we didn't speak at all. But this is where it gets weird. One day, after our summer retreat in 2011, I got a friend request from a woman named Sumiko. I noticed we had a lot of mutual friends from the retreat, so I assumed she was a counselor there. She messaged me immediately after I accepted the request. She and I became quickly acquainted. At the time, I was 15, and she was everything I needed in an older sister. Although we never met, I let my naivety get to me and confided in her about my teenage girl troubles. After months in, I remember walking into church and asking one of my youth leaders if they met a Sumiko at the retreat. He said he never heard of her. I asked him if he could check the roster, and he did, only to find out there was no Sumiko on the list. That's when things started to get super eerie for me. I panicked and went home to block Sumi on my Facebook. I saw on her page that the only person who continued to tell her it was nice seeing her was Pastor Allen. Nobody else from the retreat seemed to really be interacting with her. It all started to freak me out. I blocked her and unfriended Pastor Allen. I remember no longer attending these church retreats. A few days later, I received an email telling me that Sumiko was going through a hard time because of me, and that the email is coming from the mental hospital that she was staying at. They told me it was all my fault. I was a junior in high school under high amounts of stress from SATs, and I deleted the email because I just wanted to forget about it all and focus on studying. Shortly after, I started to receive really unfriendly anonymous messages on my Tumblr. They would tell me that I was going to burn in hell for eternity if I continued to stray from God, and they continued all the way into my senior year in high school. I always deleted and ignored them, or I'd reply sarcastically and laugh at them with my friends. Eventually the messages faded and I didn't hear much from them anymore. In 2012, I got accepted to a close-by Christian college, and I moved into my dorm. My dorm floor decided to have a little icebreaker meeting to help us get comfortable. I met another Korean girl, and we began talking about our similarities in our childhood, being raised Korean with Christian parents. I opened up to her about my encounter with Pastor Allen, and midway through the story, I saw her face slowly dropping and getting pale. She told me she had a very similar encounter with a pastor she knew, and that he seemed like it might be the same man working with the youth in an all-Korean church. I asked where she was from, and she replied with the same state that Pastor Allen was from. She then asked me if the name of the pastor was Allen. We had the same predator in our lives at the same age. I'm not sure where Allen is now, but I hope that he has not harmed any little Korean girls, or anyone for that matter. It's absolutely disgusting. He was borderline 60 years old when I was 14 to 15. It makes me sick knowing people prey on children in the most vulnerable ways. It ruined a lot of my perspective on Christianity as well. It's horrible to take something so spiritual and take advantage of a child with it. So, Pastor Allen, with a creepy young Asian girl fetish. Let's never meet again. Okay, so this just happened to me, female 28, and I'm sure I will not be able to sleep. My boyfriend is not answering the phone, and I need to get this out. My company organized an event for the clients and the staff at a luxury hotel. Everybody partied, and I got into my room an hour ago. It's 3:27 in the morning here. Like, I don't know, 15 minutes ago, a guy entered my room with a bottle of water. It woke me up. I was super scared. He says that somebody came from my room to order a bottle of sparkling water. Weird explanation. There is a minibar, and there is a corridor in the room before entering where I am in the bed. So basically I am half naked in my bed. He comes closer to me at the level of the table, apologizing for the inconvenience, but he is still there, and I kid you not, he starts talking to me, saying how he is going to be in trouble and stuff, and how someone called and he is so sorry, and the others got in the hotel super drunk, and it must have been a mistake. I swear he had been standing super close to my bed for 5 minutes, and I was so shocked I was just saying, No, it's okay. I just got scared. Really, no problem. Just go. Well, he says he doesn't see me well and asks my name. Twice, he says. Well, so I guess I wish you a good night then. Then kisses me on the cheek, like we French do, but once again, I'm half naked in my bed. Dead scared, and he is in a suit, all dressed. Literally, I don't even know what I could have done. He left after the longest minute saying how he was sorry and how he would appreciate that I don't tell anyone. And now the phone in the room just rang. I don't know if I should still be scared. Was he just confused by the mistake? I'm super scared, though I cannot think right now and my heart is racing. I need to have some rational feedback after this, really. Update 1. I am okay, by the way, 34 hours later. So, this is a story that happened to my mom's friends in Korea like 10 years ago. Every time I hear this story, I still get the chills. My mom's friend lived in an apartment complex in Seoul. She was a stay-at-home mother with a young daughter, and her husband worked during the days. One day, she was coming home from running errands with her daughter and got into the elevator in her building. When she got on, she noticed that there was a man wearing a cap and a yellow raincoat, and he kept his head low so that she couldn't really see his face. She immediately felt really uneasy and made her daughter stand to her side, furthest away from the man. What made her feel even more uncomfortable was that when she pressed the button for her floor, there was no other lit number. And on top of that, she noticed that she was carrying something wrapped inside newspaper close to his side. Things started to click in my mom's friend's head, and she started to panic and decided to take out her cell phone and pretend she was calling home to her husband, who was obviously really not at home and at work. She started saying things like, "Oh, I'm on the elevator and about to get off. Can you get the door for me?" and making it seem like her husband was waiting at home. When the elevator did reach her floor, I think she lived on like the 12th floor or something. She quickly got off and grabbed her daughter and started to walk as fast as she could to her apartment. She noticed that the man also got off on her floor and was slowly following her down the hallway. When my mom's friend got to her door, she started to bang on it and shout, "Hey, I'm home. Please open the door," and kind of pretended like he was coming to answer the door. Upon seeing this, the man in the yellow raincoat started to walk away back towards the elevator. When he seemed to be far away enough, my mom's friend quickly picked up her daughter and slid open the door's passcode thingy. This is usually how people get into their homes in Korea, and started to frantically punch in her key code. But the problem was that the buttons would make sounds, so the man knew that nobody was going to answer the door for her, and he turned around and started to run back towards her. My mom's friend at this point was practically screaming, and when she finally got her door to open, the first thing she did was throw her daughter in through the door. When she got in herself, she saw that the man was pretty much inches from the door, but she managed to shut it and lock it before he could wedge his hand or weapon into the door. Afterwards, looking through the door's peephole, she saw that the man was walking away back towards the elevator. Several months later, my mom's friend was watching the news and there was coverage of the capture of a serial killer named Yu Young-chul, who used to kill a lot of prostitutes. She told my mom that she could never forget the dread she felt when she saw the too familiar yellow raincoat and hat that he was wearing when apprehended. A couple of years back, I lived for about a year and a half in Moscow. I mostly madly loved that city. I was studying Russian and naturally I fell in with a group of my fellow English-Russian students and expats. It didn't do my liver any favors since we went out and sampled the chaotic nightlife at least once a week, often more often. I'm not a massive party animal and I can't stomach going home in the wee hours of the morning all the time, so often I'd catch the last train home rather than go to clubs and stay out till 5. A few quick facts for those not familiar with Moscow. 1. There are very strange people in that city sometimes. Man, I really love that place, but there are some proper oddballs. 2. The last metro train runs at about 1:30 a.m. I think. Unless you catch that, you've either got to try your luck with taxis or walk or wait until the morning trains and get in with the commuters. I'm a cheapskate and getting the metro was always easier and cheaper. 3. Moscow Metro is legendarily complicated and weirdly organized and intimidating. It's also very kind of creepy at 1 a.m. when, for a bustling metropolis outside the city center, there aren't many people hanging around in the station. Those big, grand Stalinist halls, totally devoid of anyone else. Bloody freaky. Like the setting of some weird dystopian futuristic zombie thing or something. Always gave me the heebie-jeebies. I should also add that for some strange reason, the men there seemed to think I was a member of the sex industry often. This was mainly a problem in the winter months because maybe the women don't risk the minus temperatures at 2 a.m. Just kidding. Maybe just because, I don't know, I spent most of the time dressed like Scott of the Antarctic and trying not to faceplant on black ice, none of which screams prostitute to most people, but... So onto the weirdo. I'd been out to the bars with my friends, and since I had planned a big sightseeing day the next day, I bailed on going to the clubs and headed home. I had a few friends who lived on the same line, but this night they were all going on a proper night out, so I thought, screw it, and braved a boring metro ride home alone. Going home started happily, merrily, drunkenly hopped onto a train, and it was quiet, but not too quiet. A couple of merrymakers out and about, but I got a seat with loads of space in a relatively quiet car, and I kind of zoned out for a few moments. Our antagonist got on at the next stop. He was a very big man, heavy set, but also generally huge, and he stood near the doors. I don't know why I just kind of ended up spacing out in his direction. I was drunk, alright, but I did end up staring a little bit, not paying attention, just waiting for my stop. Gradually, though, I noticed he had this pool of pinkish, reddish, watery stuff collecting in drips around his feet. Like, you know, the stuff you get in a packet of meat. My brain processed this as blood at first, so I stared like an idiot, wondering if this man was injured or something. When I looked up, I made embarrassing eye contact and realized two things. The liquid was leaking from his shitty battered-looking backpack he was carrying. Seriously, who carries leaking meat in a backpack? And he was also staring at me. I looked away. He came to sit in the opposite seat from me, still staring. I only had to wait one stop for the station I had to change lines at, but it was the most damn uncomfortable wait I've had for a long time. He stared at me the whole time with something my brain can't decide was a weird rape or assault face or a want to hurt you face, since I was too scared to properly look at him. My station came. I got off the train. Meat Man followed, which I shrugged off. Maybe he lives at this stop, I said to myself. To be sure he wasn't following me because he made me massively uncomfortable, I took a very counterintuitive and convoluted path to the platform I needed to catch the last train from, even at the risk of missing it. Fortunately, this station was quite busy and full of guards for some reason, or I might have freaked out a bit here and then. I genuinely took the most stupid time-consuming trip of the platform I could think of. I looked over my shoulder a lot. I kid you not, he followed me every step of the way, step after leaking step. I tried everything to shake this man. When my train arrived, I got into one car, dived off, and ran into another, running like a lunatic to avoid missing it. He somehow followed me. I pretended to not get off at the next stop, the station before my station. He started to follow but didn't buy it. All I could think of is, wow, I'm going to be killed by the Russian equivalent of the Midnight Meat Train Man. This can't be happening. I purposely avoided even looking at him. I didn't want to miss my stop, so I jumped off the train like a crazy person. Again, luck was not on my side because that jerk must have the reflexes of a cat. My station was one of the ones that was genuinely really quiet, like a freaking tomb, and it creeped me out the best of times. To make it worse, the easiest way home was through one of those convoluted Moscow metro overpasses. I decided to do the stupid thing and ignore this man, just go about my business and hope he went away. Halfway through the underpass, this man was still following me with his drippy bag and his crazed, unfocused eyes and his weird rape murder face. And Dutch courage kicked in. I was pretty spooked out by this man, but I was also really upset and angry. Suddenly, like really mad. What I did next was stupid, but it is a lighthearted end to the story of the scary Moscow Metro Man. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. It probably won't work most of the time. I wouldn't try it on anyone or anything else. For example, bears. Yeah, so please don't try this on bears. I was also really drunk, which is probably why I thought screw it and decided to do it. Aware that this man was still following me and closing in and genuinely being very stalky now, I turned around and shouted, "If you don't leave me alone, I will murder you," and other things to that extent in a drunken mix of Russian and English. I kind of had a very special kind of alcohol and fear-fueled temper tantrum, which involved jumping and feeling like a crazy person, swearing and throwing my shoes at it. You know, out crazy the crazy. Eventually, I managed to get him to piss off enough to make a getaway, and put enough distance between us that I managed to lose him. Worth looking like an idiot for, I reckon. I don't know why he was following me or what was in that damn bag, that leaking stuff, or why he looked so mad. He might have been drunk, maybe, and I know my imagination takes me down a dark route when I think about it. Maybe I was lucky to not be found face down in a ditch or something. Maybe he had truly horrible plans and I made it too much hassle to be worth the payoff. Maybe there was something properly nasty in that minky looking backpack. I'll never know and I don't want to. On the other hand, he was scared off by a drunken woman waving her arms like a helicopter, shouting threats and throwing her shoes around, so maybe he was just, I don't know, mildly creepy and not much of a threat at all. Again, I'll never know. But that's the story of the Moscow Meat Man. Hope it wasn't too long. I'd like to share with you a series of horrific events from my childhood that we never had a real resolution to. There were some suspects, but nobody was ever brought to justice. Also, there has been a lot of terrible things happen on my mom's property, and that's another story, but here's part of the beginning. This part of the story happened roughly around 1990 during my summer break from school, but continued on for quite some time. I must have been about 2nd or 3rd grade age, and I grew up with just my mom because my dad was never in the picture, so we lived alone until I was about 12, when she remarried. Our secluded country neighborhood was safe for the most part, and all of our immediate neighbors were elderly, save for one couple who had a few young adult sons around my brother's age. For the most part, though, there wasn't much riffraff in the area. At first, there were only minor clues to indicate something was going on, such as things being moved in the backyard, and I guess because my mother was always being paranoid and definitely a conspiracy theorist, she always had an idea that something was happening. I didn't really know this until I heard her talking about it much later after the events. She tried to hide things so they wouldn't scare me. She even started sleeping in my room with me at night, probably because she was paranoid, but I assumed it was because we could stay up late and watch movies together and eat snacks. One morning after I got up, I noticed that our old wooden back door had huge chunks missing out of it around the part where the lock/bolt goes into the door frame. It was as if somebody were trying to chip away at the locked part. I showed Mom what I had discovered, not realizing why the door was damaged, and she went completely silent, pale-faced and panicked. I could tell something was wrong, but I was too young to understand that somebody had apparently tried to break in, either in the night or when we were out. That day, she mended the door to the best of her ability, and if I remember correctly, she even put a new lock on it from the hardware store. She also filed a police report, but there was nothing they could do. I had a German Shepherd named Munchie. He was a big, spoiled baby who loved raiding the fridge with me, but to a stranger, he was probably very intimidating. He was also my best friend and very watchful over me, and I miss him to this day. For a week or two, after Mom and I would go to bed, Munchie would start pacing and whining and acting very anxious. Since we lived in such a rural place with no imminent danger, we thought Mom would frequently let him outside by himself, so one night when he was acting exceptionally strange, she let him outside alone. We didn't have central air because our house was old, built in the 50s. We were very poor, and Kentucky summers weren't really too hot anyways. At night, Mom would open all the windows in the house, with the halfway burglar latch, of course. Since she was in my room with me watching a movie, we had both my bedroom windows all the way open. My back window overlooked a bit of a hill, which gradually sloped into a low, wide bottom. The bottom was full of tall weeds and bushes. Suddenly, we heard movement in the brush of the bottom. Munchie. Then we heard him snarling like a werewolf. Mom got up and ran to the window but couldn't see anything. What we heard next was horrifying. It sounded as if Munchie was attacking someone. He was making those awful noises as if he were eating somebody alive. I began to cry, terrified that something would happen to my best friend, and my mom started screaming in horror for Munchie to come home. We heard what sounded like somebody escaping my dog's wrath and taking off through the brush. Mom ran to the back door with me right behind her and called for Munchie at the top of her lungs, until he came running back into the house. He was panting and grunting and bristled up. I hugged him so tight, I probably nearly squeezed the life out of him. As time progressed, things got worse. Being so young, I didn't know for a long time, but my mom was safeguarding the house. She even moved a full tall dresser in front of my window that overlooked the hill in the bottom. She tried her best, but whoever was harassing us was finding new ways to make our life miserable, or maybe try to kill us. One night, she said that she heard peculiar noises coming from the backyard. I don't necessarily remember this, so I called her for details before writing this. Sounds were coming from under the dining room windows, which overlooked the backyard. She turned on the security light on the back of the house and saw a ladder propped up against the back of our house, as if somebody were trying to climb through our windows. This incident seemed more like an empty threat than a real attempt, especially considering the back door was probably easier access. We don't know if the person thought the windows would be unlocked or what, but for whatever reason, they gave it a try. Again, she called our local police and they did nothing. I should probably note that we didn't really have much law enforcement there. You probably wouldn't believe me if I tried to tell you how worthless law enforcement was, and still is in that area. On another occasion, and this memory is burned into my brain because it scared me so bad, somebody snuck up to my bedroom window one night. I hate to even think what their intentions might have been. Mom had drifted off to sleep, but I was quietly watching the rest of Willy Wonka. I was looking in the direction of my ominous window, the one overlooking the bottom, so I ended up getting a good look at this big white hand which reached up and slapped my window screen multiple times, in rapid succession. I screamed. Mom woke up and the tormentor took off, no doubt through the brushy bottom. My mom is a dog person. She adores dogs and always had lots of dogs and puppies around. We had 7 little black pups and the mother dog around this time, and they lived outside on our huge property, had plenty of space to play, and had a very nice big doghouse. At some point around the same time this stuff was happening, we had to be out of town for a few days. Mom had some people watching the house, and I guess she didn't really think anything horrendous could happen. Then again, she wasn't aware of how far this would go. When we came home, Mom's puppies had been killed and lined up in a row in the side yard, close to my window that overlooked the bottom. This was obviously absolutely devastating. The police did little to help, which included telling her how short to saw off her shotgun so that I was still legal and advising us to keep Munchie in the house. I forgot to ask, but I'm nearly positive that my mom ended up sending the mommy dog away to my sister's house on the other side of town. Months later, incidents were increasing in occurrence, and then somebody decided to take it way too far. Something hitting the back of the house in the wee hours of the morning. Mom looked out the windows and saw nothing, at least not until the next morning. She found a stick with a charred pine knot on it. Somebody had apparently lit it on fire and threw it at our house. I assumed they were hoping our house would burn. And don't even ask about the cops because they did nothing yet again. I wouldn't be surprised if they knew who the culprit was and just didn't care. Then one day, Munchie went missing. He had gone out to the bathroom in the evening before bed, but he didn't come back immediately like always. He vanished. I don't even want to go into detail about this because it breaks my heart all over again, but we found him days later. He had been poisoned. To be completely honest, I could keep going with this story. Although it takes a lot of unbelievable turns, not all of them are horrifying. Some are just ridiculous. Then around 2009, a multiple year-long court case began where my mom had to fight a group of her neighbors in court to keep them from stealing her property. Those events led to us believing that the people involved with that case may have had something to do with the torment we experienced all those years ago. But really all we can do is assume. So, tormentor, I wish we could meet, but you are a coward who harasses women and children and hurts animals. My cousin lived with me and my husband for about 3 or 4 months while she was looking for a new place, as she and her boyfriend recently split up. Tina was very helpful, and there would be a number of times that I'd come home from work and see that she's already making dinner for all of us, has cleaned the kitchen, or has ironed. She started seeing this guy called Mark, and I personally didn't like him and thought she could do better, but my husband convinced me into giving him a chance. Tina would text us and ask if it's okay if Mark could come over and stay, or if Mark could come to dinner. And I had to fight back the urge to say no, but I said our house is now her house, so she is welcome anytime. Each time I met him, I knew something wasn't right with him, and I couldn't put my finger on it, but I always had some creepy vibe. He always seemed to stare too much or would try and come up with weird topics to talk about over dinner. While I'm eating, I'd rather not talk about how much bleach it would take to kill someone. As I said, very weird things. Small items started going missing, and it was small things. Like some buttons came off my husband's jacket, so I got some new ones that matched the others the best I could and placed them on the side. I came home and they were nowhere to be seen, and the household said they didn't pick them up. My husband even joked around that the borrowers have it again. On payday, I decided to go and get some new clothes from a shop here, as I didn't want to spend that much. I usually grab some funny underwear, by the way, and by funny, I mean underwear with Family Guy or the Cookie Monster on them, and try and find some matching bras to go with it. I grabbed what I wanted, and putting everything away, I started dinner. A few weeks went by and I was just getting changed, and I opened my drawer and my Cookie Monster bra was there. I suddenly remembered that I have matching underwear, and I'm laughing to myself, wondering what my husband will say when he finds out that I've got Cookie Monster underwear. I honestly couldn't find my stuff anywhere. I tipped my drawer out and went through it all, and I couldn't find them still. I obviously did buy them as I had the bras proof. I even looked in the bag in case I somehow left them in there. Feeling a bit let down and confused, I got dressed and carried on with my day. Fast forward a few more weeks, and my husband had my car for the day as he had a meeting a few hours away. I walked to work and I was on my way walking back from work when I heard a beep and a car pull up. Looking inside, I see Mark. "Hey, need a ride?" Yes please. Thank you very much." I get in the car and casually throw my work bag in the back seat and just turn around to say thank you again to Mark. And I said thankfully he showed up, as I didn't think I could handle walking back to work. Trying to make a joke of the situation. He drops me off at my house and I pull the seat forward and grab my bag while he gets out. As my cousin is at home, I'm grabbing my bag and some deodorant has fallen out and some cookies I was saving in my bag are now in the footwell. I reach my bag under and wait to grab my things when I grab a small plastic bag. Looking inside, I see my Cookie Monster underwear, the missing buttons, a photo of me and my husband, and a used toothbrush of mine that I had to replace, and even a small collection of my false nails I was wearing once. I ended up pulling them all off as I couldn't find the missing ones to replace the ones that had fallen off. Mark, why is my stuff in your car?" Right as I said that, I stepped slowly backwards from the car and reached for my phone to call my husband. Mark straight away jumps in his car and we haven't seen him since. I told my cousin about it and she said that he always used to go to the toilet for ages, and they joked all of the time about him having a water infection or that he didn't like her cooking. I walked into the bathroom at my community college and there was another guy in there and he was at one of the two urinals. I walk in and step up to the other urinal, and from the moment I walked in to the moment I unzipped my pants, this guy was staring directly at me. In my head I thought, maybe this guy's on the spectrum or something, because our college has a lot of students that are special needs and is a great place for them to get a degree and has really good programs to work with them. So it felt off, but I thought maybe it's nothing. I only wished that this was where the interaction ended. He finished before me and went over to wash his hands. I was just waiting for him to finish up and leave the bathroom because it felt really weird. While I'm still at the urinal and this guy is washing his hands, he looks at me and says, "You're a complete stranger, so you won't judge me. Is it wrong of me to take out my anger on people I don't know?" My first thought was, this guy isn't right, but I should probably listen. But I answered and said, "No, that's not right. That isn't healthy for you or the other person." He answers, "That's the conclusion I've come to as well. Thanks." And then he turns and walks out of the bathroom without even drying his hands. I don't know about that guy. I have a bad feeling about him and I don't know what to do about this situation. So, bathroom guy, I hope you get the help you need, but let's never meet again. Edit. From all the replies, it seems most people are just as confused as I was. Some say this guy could have been dangerous or unstable. That was kind of the vibe I initially had. Some say that this could have been a question that somebody with a mental illness would ask, not aware of social norms and with no ill intent. That could very well have been it too. Personally, I hope it was the latter, and I hope I don't see him on the news for doing something horrible one day. This encounter was not too long ago and solidified in my mind why I will always close the blinds at night and why even in a quiet suburban neighborhood, you should always lock your door. I've been reading creepy stories online since I was probably 12, when I first discovered Tumblr and Reddit, creepypasta, no sleep, and of course, Let's Not Meet. So, I have long since taken to checking to all windows and locks before I go to bed, and closing blinds and curtains for fear that I might look out to see some creep in a clown costume with a knife in my garden or a person with their head at an unnatural angle. I always sort of wished I had a creepy encounter so I could write about it, but if I never have another experience like this for the rest of my life, it will be too soon. So, context. This nice suburban neighborhood, as I say, is the home of my parents. A little town in Cheshire, England, a quiet street where we all knew each other. Low crime rate except for one house, which has been broken into and robbed twice in about 10 years. Both opportunistic. Once because the keys were near the door and the invader smashed a small pane to reach them and let themselves in. The other time, they left their blinds open overnight, leaving their laptops, wallets, and both car keys on full display. Anyways, I don't live with my parents anymore, but I was back in town and staying with them for a few days over summer. I was sitting in the kitchen, which faces onto the street, and working on my laptop, just glancing up occasionally to watch people pass by walking dogs or strolling with the pram. I'd seen something moving in my periphery, so, like every time, I looked up hoping to see a dog walker or one neighbor and her newborn grandson. Nope, 2 people. A man in a semi-casual suit and a woman in plain jeans and a blouse. But they were moving weirdly. The woman had her head craned over to one of her shoulders and her arm on that side was bent backwards and unnaturally upwards with her hand rhythmically flicking. Her other arm randomly but smoothly glided about, guided by her elbow. It was a bit like when you try and push 2 magnets together at the same point of polarity. That's how I would describe it. I have friends with epilepsy, and I have never seen them contort or flick like that. Not even their myoclonic jerks. The man looked more like one of those dancing inflatables you see at a used car dealership. That's the only way I could describe his movements. They walked past my parents' house, and I instinctively called to my cat to check he wasn't outside with those weirdos. Found him upstairs in my old room. He was looking out the window, and as I followed his gaze, I saw 2 of the kid neighbors in that house that had been robbed multiple times waving across to me. Well, to my cat, but I waved back. All the same, from their parents' upstairs bedroom window. I went downstairs to tell my parents about the strange moving people, and my dad just furrowed his brow, asked if they were gone, and said to double check that the door was locked. I headed back to the kitchen to check if our back door was locked. This door doesn't have any windows in it, so you can understand I jumped out of my skin when, as I put my hand on the door handle, it was pushed down by somebody on the other side. I pushed the door immediately, before anybody could push it from outside. I also must scream because I hear my dad call back. I hear his footsteps coming through the house, and then I hear a loud gasp on the other side of the door and out of the kitchen window. Guess who I see making a threat? Creepy moving dude and dudette. By the time my dad made it through the house, they're gone. He doesn't seem to believe me, although he also doesn't seem to doubt either. He's never seen them before and takes a free pop at me for being discriminatory against potential house guests with movement disorders. We make jokes like this because I had a movement disorder as a kid, and one time a parent wouldn't let me into her son's birthday party because they would be playing Simon Says, and I made it difficult for the other kids. I digress. Anyways, these people were gone. I don't sleep well, due to that movement disorder actually. And those scary stories I read meant that I always listened to the excessive creaking in this house and noises on the street outdoors at night, like people walking home drunk and foxes mating. Most of the sounds are quiet though, so imagine my shock when my straining ears are suddenly attacked by a child's scream. It takes me a second to locate the sound and another to lurch from my bed to the window, looking straight over to the upstairs window, the same one where not 12 hours ago my neighbor's children were waving to me from. I scanned down the house and saw their front door wide open. I shouted for my parents, hoping to wake them up as I flew down the stairs in my PJs, with 999 already dialed on my phone to report this likely home invasion before I do anything else. I'm remembering to scream fire, not burglar, as I stride across the road, attempting to wake up other neighbors and gather support. There are 2 kids and a teenager in that commonly broken into house, kids who I babysat for 10 years, and one of them just screamed at 2 a.m. when their front door was wide open. I make sure I say this out loud to the emergency responder on the phone. As I near the door, I can see a figure inside moving frantically. So after telling the phone responder what is happening and answering their brief questions, I shout into the door from a safe distance, some phrases the police gave me to say. The police are on their way. We are right outside and we're getting help. Is anybody hurt? And to tell the intruders, we know you are there. Please do not hurt anyone. The police can help you. I get a response from the upstairs window and step back into the road to see a mother holding all 3 kids in her arms, and she tells me the middle child, who's 9, found intruders on the stairs when she went to get a drink in the night. The girl, Imogen, tells me they're like clowns. Clowns. This extra detail is the straw that broke the camel's back, and my vision darkens. Shit, I'm going to pass out. The last thing I hear is Emmy telling her mom I said a bad word. I came to in the middle of the road with a foil blanket on and a soft Octonauts toy under my head. I could see lots of blue lights, 3 police cars and an ambulance. That's one for me, and I can see my neighbors out of the corner of my eye. My hearing returns as Emmy tells me her little brother volunteered his toy because I hit my head when I fainted. Suddenly, I'm up and looking around to count all 5 of the family members and checking for injury. Over the top of their heads, I can see an arm frantically waving in and out of view. Yep, moving weirdos broke into my neighbor's house. I see the woman is standing still, her head still slumped to the side, just as she's been lowered into a police car. I was later told that as I spoke to my neighbors out their bedroom window, their dad had gone to fight the intruders and kicked the woman down the stairs as she was climbing them. The man was the frantically moving shadow I had seen from the doorway. Police reckon that they had been trying doors down our street and found one unlocked. I told them about the couple trying our door earlier in the afternoon. I'm guided to the ambulance and sit on the bed while the paramedics tend to a large cut on the back of my head from my fall. I vaguely feel them removing gravel, cleaning, gluing, and dressing it, but I'm preoccupied watching 2 police try to contain the human dancing inflatable man. They can't catch both arms at the same time to cuff him, so eventually, one policeman is cuffed to one of the man's hands and thus has his arm flung every which way as the man continues to move. I have no idea what they've been tried with, if they were on drugs or had a movement disorder. My dad and I do have a small bet on this matter, or when the court hearing is yet, but as a key witness, I'll be told when they need me in court. But I would happily go the rest of my life without hearing a kid scream at 2 a.m. and seeing those 2 weird moving creeps. So, creepy dancing dude and dudette, that's not me. When I was in grade school, my family lived in a house that sat directly across from the school I attended. However, there was about a half a mile of wooded area between them. I was allowed to walk to and from school because it was so straightforward. My mom informed me that she and her siblings walked through the woods to school when they were younger, so it felt like a natural and safe thing for her. I loved the excitement of being able to walk to school all on my own, and I felt pretty at home in the woods, as I had been raised around them. The walk was pretty direct, with very few issues aside from a small but wide creek that I had to cross. The creek itself was no problem. It was the fact that on each side there was a steep bank that had to be scaled. It wasn't too terrible unless it had been raining. It had rained the day before, so my steps, which were normally loud, were fairly silent. This might have saved my life. It at least saved me from something terrible. When I reached the creek, I was in my own little world. I was thinking about a science project that we had to do at school and whether or not I was fully prepared for my part in it. I was doing the supernova section and wasn't feeling very ready to make a speech in front of everyone, explaining it. Anyways, I reached the creek and dropped down the first bank with a slightly wet thud. I crossed over the water and began looking for something to grab a hold of to pull myself up with. There were usually roots sticking out to use. Before I could climb up the other side, I heard a noise, like people talking. I stopped and waited to see if I heard it again, and I did. I heard a couple of boys talking, getting closer to me. I smashed myself up against the bank and listened for a minute. I don't know why, but something just told me to stay away, that something was wrong. The boys came so close, all the way to the edge of the creek bank, but they didn't jump down. If they had, they would have seen me in a flash. As luck would have it, there was an overhang that I was able to hide under. I listened as the boys talked. Yeah, she comes through here all the time. Should be coming around in just a minute. My heart sank. I was the only person that walked this trail to and from school, and they were in my direct path. That isn't to say that no one else was ever in the woods, but in all the time that I used this trail, I had never seen another person. To get to the woods from my house, I had to cross the road and walk through a small flat area with no trees, and from the school side, I had to walk through the school's football field. Anybody from either side could have seen me going in or out of the woods easily. I stood plastered to the wall of mud, waiting for them to catch me, but they walked around a little bit, smoked a few cigarettes, and started getting frustrated. Where the heck is she, man? Said she would be here, so where is she? Maybe she didn't go to school today. Anyways, we gotta go or we're gonna miss our bus. The high schoolers caught their bus to the high school to elementary school. This told me two things. One, they were obviously in high school, so much older than me, and two, they had some seriously bad intentions toward me. I heard them leaving, but I didn't dare move. I waited a good 30 minutes or so before I darted out of the creek bed and toward home. I'll never know exactly what those boys had planned to do to me that day, and I'm not sure I want to. In December 2018, my ex and I split up after 7 years in a relationship. I was new to the dating game, so I didn't want to jump into it. In February, I met a guy at the bar that we frequent. The second time I met him, we exchanged numbers. By the end of March, I was feeling pretty comfortable and invited him to a party at my house. He stayed after the party, and one thing led to another. Well, after it was all said and done, I had a weird vibe. He was too pushy, and it made me uncomfortable. So I asked him to leave. I planned to never speak to him again, that is, until he started to text me from random numbers. He would say things like, "Hope you have fun fishing," when I didn't post on any social media that I was fishing. "I hope the movie was good," when I hadn't posted anything online that I was at the movies. He would text me and ask where in the bar I was at different bars, when I had never told anyone or posted where we were going. We had no mutual friends, so he was following me. The final straw was when my friends took me to Washington, D.C. for my 25th birthday celebration. We bar hopped all over the city. Around 2:30 a.m., we came out of the last bar we were at and decided to get cookies across the street. As we were coming out of the cookie shop, guess who pops up? You guessed it. He does. He goes, "I hope such and such were fun." I wanted to say hi earlier, but since you haven't been replying to my messages, I didn't want to freak you out. Yeah, safe to say I was terrified now. My friend's husband thankfully stepped in and called him out and threatened to call the police. I changed my number and moved. Thankfully, I haven't heard from him since, so to the guy I mistakenly had my first ever one-night stand with, let's never meet again. Update. After all the comments saying that I should still contact the police, that he could still be stalking me, I decided that it was best to do that. I contacted my local police, and they advised me to contact the police where I lived previously. I did so, and I still live close enough that I went on Tuesday to file the paperwork for a restraining order. Thankfully, I know his full name and place of employment, so they will be able to locate him. I provide all the text messages and screenshots that I have, and now we wait for him to be served. It will be a temporary 15-day restraining order. It will be extended because our local courthouse docket is on a schedule due to the virus, so once we've been given a court date, we will go. I was told by the sheriff that it shouldn't be an issue getting a judge to approve a restraining order for 2 years, with all the evidence that I have and the testimony from my friends who witnessed these events. Thank you for the advice. This happened to me a few years ago while I was still in college, but I've been watching a ton of those narrated true stories on YouTube, and I felt compelled to share my own experience. For some context, I'm Irish, and I was studying in the UK to get my bachelor's degree. I don't know how common this is elsewhere, but where I lived, it seemed to be more common enough that landlords renting to students privately would convert the front downstairs room into an extra bedroom. This is where my bedroom was for my first year. I didn't mind it too much, but it was a bit weird having the front door directly in my room. Especially since, for those who aren't familiar with terraced houses in the UK, there isn't a front garden usually, and we just had a small section separating the front door from the path outside. By now, I'd been living here for a few months, and I could recognize the difference in the sound of somebody walking past on the path and the sound of someone stepping towards the front door. On the night that this happened, I was totally alone in the house, as both my housemates were away from home for the weekend. This was a little bit unusual since neither of them usually went home except for special occasions, but I think it might have been Valentine's Day around that time or something similar. It was around 1 in the morning, and I was lying in bed and on the phone with my boyfriend at the time, as we were long distance. As we were talking, I could hear some footsteps outside, and I immediately recognized that it was somebody right outside the door. I kept listening, and I could hear them shuffling around a bit, and then they started fumbling with the door handle. That spooked me, and I told my boyfriend that I was going to have a look out the window to see if I could spot whoever it was. I I got up and part the curtains and quite literally pressed my face and hands against the window to get a look outside, since it was pitch black by now and the street lights had been turned off. It took a second then for me to realize what I was looking at, but whoever it was who was outside was doing the same exact thing I was, pressed up against the window and staring in at me inches away. I didn't scream. I just felt as if all the wind had been knocked out of me, as I remember feeling like somebody had just dunked me into a pool of ice water. Whoever it was looked to be male. Couldn't see his face properly, but I just remembered he was wearing a hoodie. He ran when he saw me, and after trying to collect myself, I quickly told my boyfriend and then rang the police. I don't remember how long it took for them to get there, but there wasn't a whole lot they could do. I think they might have done a quick patrol of the area, but nothing ever came of it. It was absolutely one of the most terrifying things that's happened to me, and I can't figure out at all why he was trying to break in. At the time I had my light on, which would have been visible from the window even with the curtains drawn, so I figured I could rule out that he was a junkie or squatter looking for a place to crash. I don't know if maybe he'd been watching me and my housemates for a while, but seeing 3 girls living alone and thought maybe this would make an easy burglary, or worse. But I am thankful I didn't have any trouble again afterwards. I couldn't sleep for days after, and I remember staying up until early morning, just watching movies on my laptop to feel less alone until I eventually fell asleep from exhaustion, once it started to get light outside. Since I was here from Ireland, I didn't even have any family members close by who I could call for or go and stay with, and it was the most agonizingly long weekend of my life waiting for my housemates to come back. I definitely think I've developed a slight phobia now of looking out the window while it's still dark outside. Now, before you bite my head off, yes, I know I have posted this story before. My reason for reposting is that the story has since been archived, and I have sort of a massive update to it that I really wanted to add. This morning, I was going through a really old hard drive and discovered a folder. The folder was named Kearney. In it was proof to validate parts of the story. So then people can hopefully stop accusing me of having made it up. I apologize for the awful quality of the pictures because these were taken back in 2007 with my video camera stills feature. So, hi everyone. Lately, I've had some requests to finally share the whole story of the homeless man I accidentally took in as a tenant and the incidents that followed. I'm just saying in advance, this is kind of a long one, but every detail is relevant. And please note, although everything I have documented is factual, the case was never solved and has likely gone cold since this happened more than 10 years ago. Now, back in 2007, I found myself working as a bartender at a now closed pub in my hometown. Not a job I particularly liked, but it did pay the bills. At this time, they had hired a new kitchen manager that we simply knew as Kearney. He was a pleasant enough man, mostly keeping to himself, but always stayed late to help the barman do our closing duties, so we all liked him for that. New in town, Kearney had yet to find a place of permanent residence, and I had recently lost my tenants, so somebody suggested that he ask me. He was considerably older than the tenants I usually took in, but having had a streak of bad luck with tenants my own age, I thought an older man with a nice steady job may be a shift in the right direction, so I agreed. Kearney wasted no time and followed me home that very same night, but only he wasn't alone. Enter Lawrence, the boyfriend of Kearney. Honestly, I hadn't even realized he was gay to that point, but it was water off my back regardless. Looking back now, what really should have bothered me though, was Lawrence's appearance. He looked like he had been sleeping on the street. Rather appropriately, as I would later find out. So Kearney moved in, and Lawrence was there a lot too. And it was easy to know when, due to his mobile ringtone sounding like the quacking of a duckling. Kearney had some habits that were rather noteworthy to this story. In particular, one, he basically never closed his bedroom door. No matter what he was doing in there, it was always open. And two, although he was a very heavy smoker, he never once smoked inside the house. So Kearney had been living there for about 2 weeks when I had come down with an awful case of pink eye. This being highly contagious, I was given leave of absence from my bartending job and therefore decided to go wait it out at my sister's for a few days. Apparently, I didn't mind giving it to her. Sorry, sis. So the day my sister was scheduled to come pick me up, no, I couldn't drive yet. I took a casual stroll into the bar that Ben, my good friend from high school and at the time coworker, and I had been building into my house, and something caught my eye. All of our liquor bottles were completely empty. Now, those who had been frequenting my house at that time would know that we weren't just talking about 1 or 2 bottles of brandy here and there, but bottles of whiskey, gin, vodka, all kinds of stuff. Basically, it was a fully stocked bar that could host a pretty big party without requiring much in the way of additions. So I called Kearney in and asked him what he knew about this, receiving feedback that Lawrence and he had been on a slight drinking binge. Those were the actual words that he used, and it left me both furious about the thousands of worth of stock they had drunk out, but also slightly impressed that he was actually still alive. Regardless, I said that I would be dealing with this upon my return. So I'm with my sister for a few days, and on Friday I get a call from my local police department asking me if I know a Conrad Schultz. Ironically enough, I didn't. They finally add that I will probably know him as Kearney and that I should probably come down to the station, as they had just arrested his boyfriend trying to sell my camera equipment. So my sister rushes me back home, where all of my camera equipment was on display at the police station. It's on this visit that I'm informed that Lawrence was actually a Navy SEAL who got dishonorably discharged before turning to a life of crime and now has a rap sheet longer than the length of a chapter book. The kicker was that both he and Kearney were actually homeless men who had met at the Salvation Army. So Lawrence is in jail and my sister drops me off at home, more or less the same time that Kearney gets home as well. Based on Kearney's account of what happened, he had turned Lawrence in himself, so he couldn't allow Lawrence to do to me what he was trying to do, I guess. Although I had appreciated his sacrifice, I still told Kearney that he would have to go, having been the overall cause of all of this. However, not wanting to leave the homeless man while homeless, I gave him until the end of the month to make other arrangements. So Monday comes, and having just completed a staff meeting, I walk home to encounter a very much free Lawrence sitting on the sidewalk across from my house, watching it. I confront Lawrence as to why he's there, and he tries to apologize before begging for money. Rather out of character, really. I dismiss him without giving him a cent. Now I go back to the previous night. See, I had mentioned the staff meeting for a reason, as it was at that meeting where we had gotten a rather sizable list of liquor bottles that had gone missing from the storeroom, leaving us all suspecting each other. I, however, would not have to wait long to figure out who the real culprit was, as a few days later I opened the garage bin in my kitchen to see the missing bottles, all empty and staring back at me. I decided to sit on this information for the time being, although I did photograph it, just in case I needed it as evidence later. I had also called over Ben to inform him of the developments. As this was quickly becoming a detective game, we decided to enter Kearney's room to search for further evidence. Nothing of vast significance in there, with one exception: 2 single photographs of Lawrence. Before he had turned into a homeless version of Lex Luthor or Charles Xavier. Actually, there were several of Lawrence's things still there, but as Lawrence had spent a lot of time there before the incident, I accepted this as normal. Now, I should also add that I had mentioned Lawrence's release to Kearney and had told him that if I even suspected that they were still seeing each other, I would throw him out of the house myself. Only a few days would pass before this came into play. On this particular night, I had been bartending again, and Kearney had constantly been stopping by the bar to help himself to drop glasses half full of wine, and half full of Coke, which he would go drink outside the restaurant. We confronted him about this, but as he correctly pointed out, he was still a manager and we had no right to tell him what he could or could not do. On his 4th trip, however, I had grown suspicious and decided to follow him outside, where I encountered Lawrence sitting outside, sharing the half Coke / half wine concoctions with Kearney. This made me mad, so the next day I returned to the restaurant with my photographic evidence, which I handed over to the general manager, who was also kind of a friend of mine. Although I hadn't physically seen it, I had heard the confrontation through the office door when he fired Kearney. Kearney left, obviously upset, and apparently had no idea that I had been the one who had turned him in. So we had closed early that night and I was walking home, going past the high school. I saw Kearney coming from the opposite direction. He walked past me, literally only saying 2 words: "I'm scared," before disappearing into the darkness. That would be the last time that I would ever physically lay my eyes on Conrad Schultz. So we reached the final week before Kearney's eviction was to take place. Ben had come to stay with me for that duration as we both wanted to monitor the situation and make sure that nothing else happened. It was in this week that Kearney's behavior suddenly changed. He was constantly smoking in his room and his door was closed 24/7. In fact, neither Ben nor I had caught so much as a glimpse of him in that entire last week, which we hadn't thought much of at that time. So, the day of Kearney's eviction comes around. Ben has gone home for a few hours and I finally hear Kearney's bedroom door open. Somebody walks out of the room, opens the front door and leaves. Followed him outside, but somehow he had already completely disappeared. What was left though was his house keys, indicating that he obviously wasn't planning to come back. I took a look at the keys, noticing something strange. Although the correct keys were all in the keychain, there were also several that weren't mine. Why would he leave me the wrong keys? I remember thinking as I walked into his room. His room was a shock, not because of the state it was in. The two had broken his bed in an act of wild monkey sex, but I had known about that already. As I said, he never closed his damn door, but more that he had literally left almost all of his belongings behind with one exception. You guessed it. The two photos of Lawrence. Upon further investigation, I suddenly realized that all traces of Lawrence ever being there had completely vanished, with all of Kearney's stuff left behind. There was one thing Lawrence left behind though, his duckling ringtone, which it turned out hadn't been so much a ringtone as an actual duckling, which now strolled around casually in the vacant bedroom, and we named him Neville, by the way. So Ben returns and gets updated about the developments, both of us thinking the way he left was rather weird. Of course, the whole thing had been weird. It was only when I asked the infamous question that all of this became a conspiracy theory. Did you ever actually see Kearney in this last week? It was to our shock that we realized that neither of us had. Suddenly putting puzzle pieces together. The changing habits, Neville the duck, the wrong keys, only Lawrence's stuff being gone. It was to great discomfort that we both asked the question, who had really been living in our house this last week? During the next few days, Ben and I went on a mission, searching the town, crawling into drain pipes, trying to find any trace of Kearney's whereabouts, but they all added up to nothing. Conrad Schultz had simply vanished off the face of the earth. That wasn't the case with Lawrence though. No, he was still around, having made some new homeless friends. We encountered him several times begging on the streets. I asked him every time, "Where's Kearney, Lawrence?" But he just acted like he had never heard of him. The last time I would see Lawrence was across from work, attempting to break into a car. I had called the police on him, and they had arrived rather quickly, arresting him on the spot. While he was being led away by the police, I shouted after him one last time, "Where is Kearney, Lawrence?" But he just ignored me and let the cops drag him away. The next day, I filed a police report, reporting Kearney as a missing person and suggesting that Lawrence may know something about it, but nothing ever came of it. So, Lawrence, I don't know if you did something to Kearney or not, but if you did, let's not meet again. Hey Reddit, I'm a long-time user, but due to the nature of this situation, I decided to use a throwaway. Trigger warning for baby death, abuse, stalking, etc. Also, apologies if this isn't the right sub, we just need answers. My girlfriend's mother is a long-time heroin user and has been in and out of jail for my girlfriend's whole life. When she lived with her mother and her mother's husband, she witnessed physical abuse and drug activity. She was forced to move out at a very young age in order to stay alive. She thought her mother was finally clean when her mom announced her pregnancy. After getting over the initial shock, my girlfriend then decided to be supportive of her mom since she thought she was clean. That was until her mom overdosed while pregnant. She decided to cut all contact at that point. My girlfriend is also a mandated reporter and last year reported her mom and her mom's husband to the state since she knew it wasn't a safe situation for the baby. The baby died in their house not even a month after due to an overdose with signs of physical abuse. My girlfriend's mother was arrested for the murder of her baby and other charges. Her husband was arrested for child endangerment and other charges very recently. At first, the judge did not grant either of them bail. Eventually, her husband was granted bail, which he posted. We did not know this until recently, which helped us put some of the pieces together. My girlfriend and I like to sit outside of her house in the car and just chat or listen to music. Recently, there have been black cars around my girlfriend's house. She is also frequently being followed by black cars when she drives me home. It's the same couple of black cars that do this. They're not just random ones. At first, we thought we were just paranoid since everybody was still in jail, but when we found out that the husband was out of jail, we began to doubt our insanity. The first major thing happened after my girlfriend and I went on a dinner date. Got home after dark and sat in her car for about 45 minutes before we noticed the same black car passing by us every few minutes. After 10 minutes of that, a different car drove towards us, flicking its high beams on when it got close enough for us to see who was inside. It swerved into the oncoming lane, and I genuinely thought I was going to hit the passenger side of the car. It sped away, and we ran inside. After that, we started noticing the black cars more and more. This past Wednesday morning, around 3 a.m.-ish, the same distinct black van that we had been seeing pulled up outside my house. This was weird because my girlfriend and I live about 30 minutes from each other in two separate cities. A man got out of the van and shined a flashlight through my yard, scanning it almost entirely. He shined the flashlight up at the window I was sitting at, kept it there for a second, then walked 30 feet to an empty driveway, scanning around there for 20 seconds before getting in the van and peeling away. The windows were ice covered and frozen, so I couldn't make out the specifics of the van, but it was strange. A few nights later, my girlfriend and I spent some time hanging out in the car when we spotted a black van hiding behind another parked car further up the street. We could only see one headlight, but it creeped by us as we sat in the car. My girlfriend lives between two dead-end streets. Think of a very blocky U, and she lives in the middle of that. The van went up the first dead end, four-way on, and sat for a few minutes before turning around and driving almost into another lane of traffic to get close to us. It then went up the other dead end and stayed put. We thought it was weird that the van didn't just back out of the first dead end, instead opting to drive all the way up the narrow street and turn around. After a few minutes, we call a friend and recount this story just to get an extra opinion. While my girlfriend was talking to our friend, I got out of the car to go for a cigarette and to see how far away the van was. I walked up the dead end that the van was on for about 15 feet before getting the worst gut feeling I've ever gotten. Across the street from me was a black mass, which was darker than the darkness around it. I decided to just turn around and rush my girlfriend into the house. Later that night, we heard a bang coming from downstairs, followed by what sounded like a boot on wooden stairs. We locked the bedroom door, and I sat against the door with a baseball bat, hoping to barricade it. A few minutes later, we heard a car door slam before the sound of tires squeezing and a car driving away. Our initial idea was maybe it came from the TV, but we had paused it, and the TV in the next room is never loud enough to feel real. When I went downstairs an hour later to get water, there was nothing damaged or missing. We theorized that maybe it was the sound of the front door trying to be opened, even though it was dead bolted. My girlfriend's exterior wall doesn't face the road, and we've never heard car sounds before. It is, however, next to a private driveway, and sometimes we'll hear her grandparents' car door close, or the neighbors backing out. The next day, I was shoveling the sidewalks at my girlfriend's house, an activity that took about 20 minutes, and I saw the same black Chevy Silverado with mud streaks on the tailgate. It circled the block about 4 times. I was able to see the silhouette of the man driving through the passenger side window, and each time it was the same man and same truck. My girlfriend lives in a small town, and we were able to catalog the neighborhood cars. The black van and truck are abnormal. Our theory is that somebody is trying to scare my girlfriend into not testifying, or flat out making sure neither of us have the ability to testify. We really just need some more opinions. Are we just paranoid, or is this something we should actually be worried about? Do you think these are just weird coincidences?